Chapter 1. Evelyn had always believed that anticipation was its own kind of happiness. That quiet, fluttering sense of expectation, the way it made time stretch and shimmer, every second infused with meaning. Tonight, she had dressed for that feeling. Slipped into Nathaniel's favorite red dress, the silk skimming her skin like a whisper. Clasped the emerald necklace he had given her on her birthday around her throat, the cool stones heavy with memory and promise. She had even curled her hair the way he liked, soft waves falling over one shoulder, careful and precise. Their third anniversary. 3 years of marriage. 6 years of togetherness. 7 if she counted the year he had chased her relentlessly, determined to win her heart. The dining table stood set behind her, candles burned low, wax pooling in pale puddles. The scent of rosemary and garlic lingered faintly in the air, remnants of a dinner now gone cold. Midnight had come and gone, slipping by unnoticed until the silence of the house became too loud to ignore. She glanced at the clock again. 12:27 a.m. Unease stirred in her chest. Nathaniel was late often, late nights, endless meetings, the ceaseless demands of running black logistics, but never on nights like this. Not on anniversaries. Not on birthdays. Not on the dates he had once sworn were sacred. She reached for her phone. Her thumb hovered over his name. Before she could press call, the screen lit up. Unknown number. Her brows drew together in faint confusion. She opened the message. "Are you waiting for your husband?" A ripple of discomfort slid down her spine. Another message arrived almost immediately. "You should go to bed. He's very busy at work." Her lips parted, breath catching. Then came the third message. A photo. Her world tilted. It was a man's torso, clad in a crisp white shirt she had ironed herself that morning. The familiar navy tie, her gift, chosen carefully after weeks of searching, hung loose around his throat. Below the hem of the shirt, bare skin was visible. No trousers. No belt. A woman's hand, nails long and lacquered in a vicious red, curved possessively over his hip. The angle of her fingers did nothing to hide what was happening. If anything, it flaunted it. Her vision blurred. She did not need to see his face. She knew his body. Every line. Every familiar slope and scar. She had memorized him in the dark, traced him in sleep, loved him in 100 tender, intimate ways. This was her husband. Something inside her fractured. The house felt suddenly too small, the air too thin. Her chest constricted, breath coming shallow and sharp as she stumbled toward the door. The night outside swallowed her whole as she rushed to her car, hands trembling as she started the engine. The drive was a blur of streetlights and wet eyes. She barely remembered the roads, only the pounding of her heart and the sickening ache hollowing her chest. Traffic was mercifully sparse, the city hushed beneath the weight of sleeping hours. Her fingers clenched the steering wheel until her knuckles burned. Black logistics towered above her, all steel and glass, a monument to the empire she had helped build. The lobby was deserted. The security guard dozed behind the desk, barely glancing up as she strode past. She took the elevator alone, the soft hum of its ascent echoing far too loudly. The doors slid open onto the executive floor. Silence, her heels whispered against polished marble as she walked down the hallway, dread thickening with every step. At the far end stood his office, its glass walls glowing faintly in the dim light. She stopped. Her reflection stared back at her, red dress, emeralds, eyes too wide, face drained of color. Then she lifted her gaze. And saw. Nathaniel sat in his chair, head tipped back, jaw slack with pleasure. His hands gripped the edge of the desk, veins stark against his skin. A woman straddled his lap, her back to the glass, crimson hair cascading down her bare shoulders and back. She moved with slow, practiced rhythm, her body rising and falling as if she owned him. As if she had every right. Evelyn's breath left her in a soundless gasp. Her knees buckled. She stumbled backward, one hand flying to her mouth as tears spilled freely, blurring the world into a smear of light and shadow. She turned and ran, the echo of her footsteps chasing her all the way back to the elevator. She did not remember pressing the button. Only the sensation of falling. The house welcomed her with familiar stillness, but it no longer felt like home. She moved through it like a ghost, hands shaking as she pulled suitcases from the closet. Clothing, shoes, documents, she tossed them in without order, breath hitching with every movement. Each folded shirt felt like a lie. Every shared belonging a betrayal. Halfway through packing, the front door clicked open. Panic seized her. She shoved the suitcase into the guest room, heart slamming against her ribs, just as Nathaniel's footsteps sounded in the hall. He appeared in the doorway moments later, immaculate as ever. Hair slightly rumpled, tie loosened, expression warm and familiar, the man she had loved for 7 years. "Hey, babe," he said softly, crossing the room in 3 long strides. "I'm so sorry I missed our dinner. Work was insane today." He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against his chest. The scent hit her instantly. Floral. Sweet. Foreign. Her stomach lurched. She pushed him away, bile rising in her throat, his brows knit together in confusion. "Are you mad?" Before she could answer, his expression shifted, lips curving into a boyish grin. He reached behind his back and produced a long velvet box. "Did you think I forgot your present?" He opened it, diamonds glittered under the light, brilliant, flawless, blinding. A necklace fit for royalty. Her throat tightened. She could not reconcile this man with the one she had just seen, breathless and debauched beneath another woman's body. The dissonance made her head spin. Her voice caught. He stepped behind her, fastening the necklace around her throat with practiced ease, then turned her gently toward the mirror. Diamonds spilled across her collarbone, dazzling against the red silk. Nathaniel stood behind her, smiling, proud. She stared at her reflection and felt nothing. "It's beautiful," she said, forcing the words past numb lips. Satisfied, he pressed a kiss to the side of her neck. "I'm going to shower." She watched his retreating reflection until the bathroom door closed. The silence rushed back in. Her phone buzzed. Her hands were cold as she lifted it. "Did you like the necklace?" Her breath stuttered. Another message appeared beneath it. "I picked it for you."
Chapter 2. Bile surged up her throat as her phone buzzed again. Her fingers hesitated before she unlocked the screen, dread curling tight in her chest. Another photo. A woman's slender neck filled the frame, pale skin glowing beneath soft light. Around it lay the exact same diamond necklace now resting against Evelyn's own throat. The shot was taken in a mirror, the woman's face carefully cropped out. She wore little more than rumpled fabric, the suggestion of bare skin unmistakable. In the blurred reflection behind her, Nathaniel stood, half-turned, adjusting his cufflinks. Evelyn's breath left her in a thin broken sound. A second message appeared. "I wore it while we made love earlier. Did you enjoy the show?" The room tilted violently. She bolted for the bathroom, fingers clawing at the clasp behind her neck. The diamonds spilled into her palm before she could stop herself. A harsh, broken laugh tore from her throat as she hurled the necklace into the trash. Then she was over the toilet, retching until her stomach burned and her vision swam. Tears streamed down her cheeks, splashing into the porcelain bowl. The door opened softly behind her. "Babe." Nathaniel's voice was filled with concern. "Are you okay?" Warm hands gathered her hair gently away from her face. Another pressed soothing circles between her shoulder blades. The kindness broke her. She sobbed, body trembling, grief and rage colliding inside her chest. It would have been so much easier if he were cruel. If he were careless. If he were blatantly unfaithful instead of this perfect imitation of devotion. "I'm not feeling well," she whispered hoarsely, straightening. "I'm going to lie down." She brushed past him before he could say anything else, retreating into the guest room and closing the door firmly behind her. The lock slid into place with a soft click. A moment later he tried the handle. "Hey, what the hell?" he called, irritation edging into his tone. "I need some space," she said quietly, exhaustion weighing down every syllable. Silence followed. I guess she's still mad, he muttered, footsteps retreating down the hallway. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closed door long after he was gone. Her heart felt hollow. She needed to think. Her mind shifted, cold and precise, sliding into the place it always did when the world began to fracture. Panic would not save her. Emotion would not protect her. Strategy might. She opened her banking app. The allowance Nathaniel deposited into her account every month sat untouched, carefully accumulating. She had never been wasteful, never extravagant. There had always been comfort in knowing she had a quiet reserve, something entirely hers. Enough for a deposit, enough to leave. She scrolled to her contacts and pressed a familiar name. The call connected on the second ring. "Hey Eve," a cheerful voice greeted. "How's life in the big city?" Bethany Simone, her best friend, her anchor, the woman who had traded skyscrapers for farmland and still managed to build a small empire from scratch. "I'm good," Evelyn said softly. Then after a pause, "I need a favor." Beth hummed encouragingly. "Go on. I need you to find an apartment. Nothing big, but I need security. Limited access. Somewhere discreet." A beat of silence. "For who?" Beth asked carefully. "For me." "What?" Beth shrieked. "I'll also need help filing for divorce." Another stunned silence. Then louder. "What?" "Beth." Evelyn exhaled shakily. "Eve," Beth said, voice dropping instantly. "Are you okay?" "No." She closed her eyes. No, the words spilled out then, the messages, the photos, the office, the necklace. Every betrayal unraveled until her voice broke and the truth lay bare between them. By the time she finished, Beth was seething with rage. "That vile piece of trash," she hissed. "I swear if I ever see him." "Beth." "Don't worry, babe. I've got you. I'll find you a place, secure, private, everything you need. You'll be out of there before he even knows what hit him." Relief trembled through Evelyn's chest. "And," Beth added carefully, "someone reached out to me last week. They're launching a massive project. They were asking about you." Evelyn stilled. "They need someone like you," Beth continued. "Top-tier systems design, optimization, strategic architecture. It's your kind of work." Her pulse quickened. Her savings would carry her only a few months. Starting over required more than courage. It required opportunity. Evelyn inhaled slowly. "Yes," she said. "I'll do it." Beth hooped. "That's my girl." When the call ended, the silence pressed in again. Evelyn lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, exhaustion finally seeping into her bones. Sleep, however, remained elusive. Memories rose unbidden. Nathaniel chasing her across campus, relentless and earnest. The flowers. The handwritten notes. The awkward boyish smiles. The way he had looked at her as if she were something precious, something rare. She remembered his voice trembling as he recited his vows. The tears in his eyes. The promises whispered against her lips. Forever. The word tasted bitter now. Tears slid silently into her hair, soaking the pillow beneath her cheek. By morning, she would begin her escape. But tonight, she allowed herself to mourn the man she thought she had married. Chapter 3. Evelyn stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the fabric over her hips for the third time. The blush-pink silk fell in soft, fluid lines, delicate and elegant. The neckline was modest, the sleeves sheer. The dress whispered refinement, restraint, and careful intention, every inch of it chosen to avoid giving the Blackwood women anything to criticize. Still, Nathaniel hovered behind her, arms crossed, jaw tight. "You look tired," he said finally. She met his gaze in the mirror. "I'm fine. You barely slept." "I'll survive one evening." He exhaled slowly, fingers flexing. "You don't have to go." Her lips curved faintly. "Of course I do. You've been pushing yourself too hard lately. You could stay home, rest, and give your family exactly what they want," she interrupted gently. "An excuse to talk." A muscle ticked in his cheek. "Everyone loves you a lot, Eve," he said. "They would understand." Evelyn couldn't help but scoff. Of course he'd say that. He stepped closer, adjusting the thin strap on her shoulder with a precision that bordered on control. "If you start feeling unwell, you tell me. We leave." "I won't," she said calmly. His eyes darkened. Evelyn. I said I'm going. The moment stretched, a familiar stalemate. Finally he nodded once stiffly. Fine. The Blackwood coastal estate was ablaze with light. Glass lanterns floated above marble terraces. Silk canopies billowed gently in the salt-scented breeze. Every surface gleamed. Polished stone mirrored tabletops, crystal flutes. Guests moved in carefully curated clusters, every face selected, every name vetted. The annual Marine Conservation Gala was one of the most elite social events of the year. Saving endangered sea turtles was merely the theme. Power was the real currency. As they stepped inside, Evelyn felt it instantly, the collective weight of expectation pressing against her ribs. Rowena Blackwood, her mother-in-law, stood near the center of the main terrace, immaculate in pearl silk, her posture aristocratic, her gaze razor-sharp. On either side of her hovered Lenora and Meredith, dressed like mirror images of refinement and judgment. A few steps behind them stood Sophie Hart, Meredith's daughter and Nathaniel's cousin. She wore emerald green, the shade chosen carefully. Bold enough to command attention, subtle enough to remain respectable. Her hair was swept into a polished chignon, her makeup flawless. Rowena's eyes traveled over her slowly. Pink, she said. Delicate choice. I thought it suited the theme, Evelyn replied. Sea turtles, Meredith added lightly. Not cherry blossoms. Lenora sipped her champagne. Still, it's sweet. Sweet in Blackwood language meant weak. Nathaniel kissed his mother's cheek, entirely oblivious. Everything's running smoothly? Impeccably, Rowena said. As always. Evelyn endured the next 40 minutes in practiced silence. Donors, politicians, diplomats, industrial heirs, faces blurred into a stream of polite scrutiny and veiled curiosity. Her background, her education, her ordinariness were dissected with surgical subtlety. And then the air changed. Not gradually. Instantly. Conversation faltered. Laughter dimmed. Spines straightened. Even the servers slowed. Dominic Blackwood had arrived. He didn't announce himself. He never did. He simply appeared, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in obsidian black, his expression carved from restraint and calculation. The scar along his knuckle caught the light as he adjusted his cuff. His gaze swept the terrace once, methodical, assessing. The entire room tightened under it. This was the man whispered about in private boardrooms and behind closed diplomatic doors. The one who dismantled competitors with ruthless precision. The one who never forgave and never forgot. Danger walked like a shadow at his heels. Nathaniel stiffened. Uncle. Dominic's gaze settled on him briefly. Nephew. A nod. Nothing more. His attention moved on. Evelyn exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She felt smaller in his presence, though he hadn't looked at her twice. Everyone did. He bent rooms around himself without effort. She drifted toward the refreshment table, needing space. That was when Lenora struck. Oh, Evelyn, she said, stepping close. Let me get you a refill. Evelyn barely registered the tilt of the glass. Only the sudden pressure at her waist firm, controlled. As she was shifted a half step back. Wine splashed harmlessly onto the marble instead of her dress. Her breath hitched. Dominic stood beside her, his hand still at her waist, warm and immovable, anchoring her in place. His other hand had intercepted Lenora's wrist mid-motion. The closeness was abrupt, intimate, unavoidable. Lenora froze. How careless, Dominic said mildly. The words were soft. The threat beneath them unmistakable. Lenora's face drained of color. Of course, how clumsy of me. He released her wrist. Only then did his hand leave Evelyn's waist. For a split second, his gaze flicked down to her, assessing, clinical and unreadable. Then he stepped back. The moment dissolved. Nathaniel had turned just in time to see the end of it. He marched towards them, jaw ticking. Everything okay? He asked sharply, his eyes cutting to Dominic, then back to Evelyn. Yes, she said. Dominic had already turned away, swallowed by the crowd. Stay away from my uncle. He's bad news. He grinded out, staring at Dominic's receding back. If Nathaniel had one insecurity, it'd be Dominic Blackwood. Not much farther apart in age, they were brought up as rivals who'd compete for the heir title. But Dominic had completely changed the trajectory when he stepped away from the business 5 years ago and started his own company from scratch. Now it is one of the most influential businesses in the world. You rather have me get splashed with wine? Evelyn said coldly. No, that's not what. He fumbled, but she didn't stay to listen and walked away. He followed. 10 minutes later his phone rang. She glanced at his screen and saw Brielle Sinclair, his secretary and mistress, the one who'd been texting her. She might have carefully hid her face, but Evelyn knew. He picked up the phone and listened to the other side, his face growing concerned. I need to go to the office. It's urgent, he said to Evelyn, who rolled her eyes internally. I'll be quick, he said, already walking away. He hesitated, scanning his family, then her. Stay close to Mother. She didn't respond. The moment he disappeared inside, the temperature shifted. Rowena's smile vanished. Meredith's gaze sharpened. Lenora straightened. Well, Rowena said coolly. That was inconvenient. Evelyn lifted her chin. What was? That display, Meredith replied. You seem determined to attract attention. I was nearly spilled on. Lenora shrugged. Accidents happen. Evelyn didn't answer. Everyone present knew it was not an accident. Rowena's eyes were hard. 3 years, Evelyn. Here it comes. No pregnancy. No heir. No visible contribution to the family's legacy. Her lips curved faintly. Tell me, what exactly do you offer Nathaniel? Evelyn straightened. I guess it's time for me to leave as well. She smiled sardonically. Meredith blinked. Excuse me. I'm done for the evening. Rowena's lips thinned. Nathaniel didn't dismiss you. I'm dismissing myself. She turned before they could stop her. No one followed. Outside, the sky had opened up. It poured down in icy sheets, soaking her hair, her dress, her shoes within seconds. The long private drive stretched ahead empty. No taxis ventured this far without invitation. Her phone showed no signal. She stood there, drenched, trembling, exhausted. And then headlights cut through the rain. A black sedan rolled to a smooth stop beside her. The window lowered. Dominic. Get in, he said. She hesitated only a moment before opening the door. Warmth enveloped her. The car smelled faintly of cedar and leather. The silence inside was heavy, controlled but not uncomfortable. He pulled onto the road while cranking up the heat. He glanced at her once. The muscle in his jaw twitched. He reached behind him and placed his jacket on her lap. Put it on, he said gruffly. Only then did she realize that her silk dress was clinging to her body, nearly transparent, leaving her feeling exposed in a way she hadn't expected. Heat rose up her cheeks and she quickly put the jacket on. They drove without speaking. She stole a glance at his profile, the clean angles of his jaw and the controlled perfection of his dark hair, undisturbed by wind or rain. Everything about him spoke of power, wealth, and a life lived far beyond ordinary reach. He didn't resemble comfort or safety. He felt like a storm waiting. The rain softened as her building came into view. When the car stopped, she reached for the handle. Evelyn, he called out as if unintentionally. She looked back. Be careful, he said. Not gentle, not kind. It was a warning. Her throat tightened. Of what? His gaze was unreadable. Everyone. She nodded once and stepped out into the night. Chapter 4. The short walk from the car to the door had chilled her to the core. The world tilted the moment Evelyn stepped inside. The familiar marble foyer blurred. The chandelier fractured into streaks of light. Her knees buckled before she could reach the railing. Then everything went dark. The scent of antiseptic pulled her back to consciousness. Sharp, sterile, clinical. White surrounded her, walls, sheets, ceiling, light. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then a soft voice cut through the fog. Mrs. Blackwood? You're awake. A smiling nurse leaned into her field of vision, warm and gentle. How are you feeling? Evelyn blinked slowly. Her throat was dry. Fine, she said hoarsely. What happened? You had a high fever and fainted. Someone brought you in last night. The nurse adjusted her foreline. You gave us quite a scare. Someone. Evelyn nodded faintly. The cold rain, the exhaustion, the emotional toll. It must have been enough to push her body past its limit. Her gaze drifted around the room. A VIP suite. Fresh orchids lined the windowsill. Roses, lilies, and peonies crowded every surface. Helium balloons floated near the ceiling, their metallic letters spelling out, "Get well soon." Once this would have made her smile. Once it would have made her feel cherished. Now the heavy perfume of so many flowers turned her stomach. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, tugged the four-stand after her, and slipped quietly out into the hallway. She walked without direction, her steps slow, her mind numb, until a familiar voice stopped her cold. "Nate, slow down." Her breath caught. She turned. At the far end of the corridor, beneath the soft hospital lighting, Nathaniel emerged from the obstetrics and gynecology department. Beside him walked Brielle Sinclair. Her hand rested protectively over her stomach. His arm hovered close, guiding her forward with unconscious care. Nathaniel held a thin medical file, his expression alight with something Evelyn had not seen in a very long time. Pure, unrestrained happiness. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. It didn't take brilliance to understand what was happening. Tears burned behind her eyes. She needed to move. Her fingers trembled as she lifted her phone, snapping several photos before they could notice her. Then she turned and fled, her heart pounding violently against her ribs. She barely made it back to her room before her legs gave out. Sliding down against the door, she pressed her fist to her mouth to smother the sob that tore free. Pregnancy. The one thing she had wanted more than anything. 3 years. Countless doctors. Endless tests. Hormone injections. Treatments. Hope. Disappointment. Repeat. The doctors had always told her the same thing. There is nothing wrong with you. Be patient. Let nature take its course. She had believed them. She had waited. She had endured. And now, his mistress was pregnant. Nathaniel loved children. He had always spoken about them with longing, with warmth, with dreams of a large family. Yet after every failed test, he had held her in whispered reassurances, telling her that time was on their side. All the while, he had been building a future with someone else. Her phone vibrated. She didn't want to look. She did anyway. Brielle. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Blackwood?" Her grip tightened. Another message arrived almost instantly. "Brielle. You must be better if you're already walking around." Cold dread settled in her gut. "Brielle. I suppose you figured it out by now. I'm pregnant with Nate's child." Evelyn closed her eyes. "Brielle, he's so happy. He's always wanted to be a father." Her thumb hovered over the screen for a second before she shut the phone off entirely. Something inside her snapped. Not into grief, but into razor-sharp clarity. She wiped her face, drew in a slow breath, and rose just as the door opened. Nathaniel stepped inside, a pristine white cake box balanced carefully in his hands. "Hey, babe," he said softly, concern etched across his features. "How are you feeling?" She stared at him blankly. "I nearly lost my mind when I came home and found you unconscious," he continued, setting the box down. "I told you. You've been pushing yourself too hard." She nodded once, not trusting herself to speak. His expression brightened suddenly. "Look what I got you." He opened the box with a flourish. Inside sat a perfectly crafted Esmore's layer cake, toasted marshmallow cream, dark chocolate shavings, graham crumble. Her chest tightened. Years ago, she had once told him she wanted a cake that tasted like bonfires and late nights. He'd contacted the most elite bakery in the city, commissioning an entirely new dessert just to recreate that flavor. A week later, he had surprised her with it on her 21st birthday, eyes bright, waiting for her reaction as if it were the greatest gift he could offer. She had loved it. She had loved him. He lifted a fork and held it gently to her lips. She took the bite automatically. Tasted like ash. She swallowed, her throat burning. He was smiling. Radiant. Unrestrained. Almost boyish. "Did something good happen?" she asked quietly. He didn't hear the hollowness in her voice. "Yes," he said softly. "I got some amazing news today." The last thread of restraint inside her snapped. She grabbed the cake box and hurled it against the wall. Cream and crumbs splattered across white paint, sliding down in slow, obscene streaks. "What the hell, Evelyn?" Nathaniel shouted, leaping to his feet. Her voice was eerily calm. "It doesn't taste good." He stared at her, stunned. Then he cursed under his breath, spun on his heel, and stormed out, the door slamming behind him. Evelyn remained seated, staring at the ruined cake, the mess, at the wreckage. And for the first time she didn't cry. Chapter 5. Midnight bled quietly into the hospital room. The flowers had been removed. The cake mess cleared. The scent of antiseptic reclaimed the air. The silence pressed heavy against Evelyn's ears as she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Slowly, deliberately, she turned her phone back on. The screen lit up with a flood of notifications. Dozens of missed calls. Messages stacked one atop another. She ignored the ones from Betrayal without opening them. Her gaze slid instead to Nathaniel's. Nate, going to work late. She stared at the words for a long moment before exiting the chat. How many times had she read this message and believed it? All this time, was he just with his mistress while he was working late? She hated this self-doubt. The next notification made her breath hitch. Beth. The house is ready. Move in anytime. An address followed beneath it. Something inside her loosened. Relief spread through her chest, quiet, steady, undeniable. Now she could leave. She would have done it sooner if she had somewhere safe to go. Somewhere beyond his reach. Hotels were useless. Short-term apartments were easily traced. With his resources, his power, and his influence, privacy was an illusion. She had no family. No fallback. No refuge. Until now. Power, she knew, was a currency. And for the first time since her marriage, she finally had a little of her own. By morning, she signed her discharge papers and walked out of the hospital alone. The house greeted her with cold stillness. No lights. No voices. No warmth. The home she had once poured herself into. Every corner carefully curated, every detail chosen. Felt hollow now. Not broken. Just empty. She retrieved the suitcases she had hidden in the guest room. Her clothes were already packed, organized, and methodical. Only a few personal items remained behind, left intentionally so he wouldn't notice the gradual disappearance. She moved through the master bedroom with practiced efficiency, opening drawers, unlocking boxes, collecting every piece of jewelry he had ever given her. Emeralds, diamonds, pearls, limited edition watches. All of it went into a compact travel pouch. Then she hesitated outside the bathroom. Her gaze settled on the small trash bin. Slowly, she reached inside and pulled out the necklace. The diamond necklace glinted under the soft lighting. Flawless, obscene. Disgust curled in her stomach, but she added it to the bag. Value was value. Sentiment had no place in survival. Once everything was ready, she wheeled her suitcases to the front door. Before leaving, she placed a thick envelope carefully on the living room table. Then she stepped outside and called for a cab. As the city unfolded around her, something she hadn't felt in years stirred quietly in her chest. Freedom. Nathaniel had been calling Evelyn for over an hour. The hospital had informed him she'd been discharged. She hadn't answered. Annoyance simmered beneath his growing unease. Evelyn had been acting unpredictably lately. Distant, cold, volatile. It was getting tiresome. He slammed his car door shut and entered the house, already preparing a lecture. The silence struck first. It was wrong. Eve, he called. No answer. His steps quickened as he moved through the rooms, checking the bedroom, the guest room, the study. Empty. The air felt stale, untouched. A strange dread crawled up his spine. He returned to the living room, phone pressed to his ear, calling her again. Straight to voicemail. That was when he saw the envelope. Thick and heavy. Waiting. Frowning, he picked it up. The contents spilled onto the table, then onto the floor. Photographs. His breath left him in a rush. Him and Betrayal. In his office. On his desk. Her legs wrapped around his waist. Her lipstick smeared against his throat. Another photo outside the hospital. Betrayal cradling her stomach. His hand hovering protectively near her back. Then the screenshots. Text messages. Explicit. Undeniable. His pulse roared in his ears. At the bottom of the pile lay a document that he recognized it instantly. Divorce papers. Filed and signed. Evelyn Breyer. His heart slammed violently against his ribs. No! He grabbed his phone, redialing her number with shaking fingers. Voicemail. Panic surged, sharp and blinding. He punched in another number. "Find my wife," he barked the moment his assistant answered. "Now." The call barely ended before he was back in his car, tires screeching as he tore through the streets. He had a score to settle. Chapter 6. Nathaniel stormed into his office, the glass door slamming so violently against the wall that the impact shuddered through the corridor. The sound echoed long after he'd already begun pacing, measured strides cutting sharp lines across the marble floor. Andrew followed a heartbeat later, breathless. "Sir, what's wrong?" "Bring me Brielle." The command was clipped, lethal in its restraint. Andrew didn't hesitate. 20 minutes crawled by in a silence thick enough to suffocate. Nathaniel stood by the window, jaw locked, fingers curling and uncurling at his sides as city skyline blurred beyond the glass. Every second sharpened his fury, refining it into something cold and surgical. When the door finally opened, Brielle walked in with the easy confidence of someone who still believed herself untouchable. She didn't sense the danger until she was halfway across the room. A soft smile curved her lips, her hand drifting instinctively to her stomach. "Nate," she said sweetly, voice lilting. "Did you miss me and the baby? We've been thinking about you all day. He's been so active, I thought maybe." The crack of his palm across her cheek cut her off mid-sentence. The sound rang violently through the office. Brielle staggered, her head snapping to the side as she stumbled back, one hand flying to her face. For a moment, she simply stared at him, stunned, breath locked somewhere between shock and disbelief. "I warned you," Nathaniel said quietly, each word sharpened to a blade. "Never to let Evelyn know about us." His gaze was glacial, merciless. "And yet you took it upon yourself to torment her." Brielle's lips trembled. "Nathaniel, I only..." "Enough." The single word slammed into her harder than the blow. He advanced slowly, forcing her backward until the edge of his desk pressed into her spine. "Pack your things," he continued, voice dangerously calm. "You're leaving the country tonight. From this moment on, I don't want to see your face again." The meaning of his words hit her in brutal clarity. Her knees weakened. "You can't do this," she whispered. "I'm carrying your child. You can't just discard me like I'm nothing." A humorless laugh escaped him. "A child?" His eyes were ice. "You think you're worthy of carrying my heir?" Her composure shattered. She dropped to her knees, clutching his arm, desperation stripping away all pretense. "Please. I was jealous, that's all. I love you, Nate. I swear I'll never cross her again. I'll disappear, I'll stay quiet, just don't send me away." He wrenched his arm free as if her touch burned. She fell backward, hitting the floor hard. A sharp gasp tore from her chest, her hands flying to her stomach as her body curled inward, pain rippling through her in visible waves. Nathaniel stilled. For a fraction of a second, something unreadable flickered across his face. "It hurts," she whimpered, twisting, panic bleeding into her voice. "Something's wrong. Nate." "Andrew." The single command cut through the room. Andrew rushed forward, carefully helping Brielle onto a chair as she trembled violently, tears streaking down her flushed cheeks. "Nate," she cried, reaching for him weakly. "Please." Blood tracked a path down her legs, pooling on the carpet beneath. The sight punched through the last of his restraint. Without another word, he scooped her into his arms and strode from the office, urgency replacing fury in long, ruthless strides. The hospital hours bled into each other, time dissolving into a blur of antiseptic air, tense corridors, and the hollow hum of waiting. When the doctor finally emerged, Nathaniel was on his feet instantly. "Is the baby okay?" The doctor gestured toward his office, his expression grave. Once seated, he folded his hands. "For now, both mother and child are stable. But the situation is delicate. Extreme emotional distress triggered the complications. She cannot endure further stress. Not if you want to avoid severe consequences." Nathaniel exhaled slowly, tension draining from his shoulders in controlled increments. "I understand." As he left the office, relief gave way to something heavier. A crossroads. Because no matter what responsibility now tethered him to Brielle, there was only one woman he loved. And he had already lost her. Chapter 7. Evelyn settled into her new life more easily than she had expected. Beth had delivered, as she always did. The apartment was a compact studio tucked into one of the city's most discreet luxury buildings, the kind that didn't announce its wealth with glittering facades, but hid it behind clean architecture, private entrances, and a level of security that made anonymity feel like a promise. It was far smaller than the home she had left behind, yet it felt infinitely more spacious. Here, every breath belonged to her. She stood by the tall window, phone pressed to her ear as afternoon light filtered softly across pale wooden floors. "I know it's a high-scale project," she murmured, fingers idly tracing the edge of the glass, "but I can't meet them publicly right now. They must not know about my husband or his family. Powerful circles overlap more than people realize, and if that information reaches him—" "I know, babes," Beth cut in gently, background noise clattering faintly on her end. "That's why I handled the vetting personally. They've agreed to a preliminary meeting off-site, and I'll have them sign NDAs before you even step into the room. You'll be using your maiden name." Evelyn exhaled slowly. "Trust me," Beth continued. "You want this project. It's going to redefine your portfolio." Evelyn closed her eyes. She had read the brief twice already. Every detail had spoken directly to her instincts, to the kind of work she had once dreamed of building her career on before life had rerouted her. It was ambitious, technically demanding, exactly the sort of challenge she craved. "Fine," she said quietly. "I'll meet them." Beth's pleased laugh crackled through the speaker. "Sending you the address. They don't want you in their office yet. Very cloak and dagger. But the compensation will make you forgive the theatrics." When the number appeared on her screen, Evelyn's breath caught $10 million. The project would span 6 to 12 months, a demanding timeline, but the payout would buy her something priceless: freedom. After the call ended, she set the phone aside and reached for the second device resting on the kitchen counter. Her old phone. She had changed numbers days after leaving, fully aware of how many connections, trackers, and digital threads could be weaponized against her. Still, she checked the old device occasionally, a habit she hadn't yet managed to break. The screen lit up. Missed calls, messages, voicemails. Nathaniel's name dominated the list, stacked one after another in relentless persistence. Brielle's earlier messages still lingered above them, untouched and unread. Evelyn turned the screen face down without opening a single thread. Whatever storms raged in that world were no longer hers to endure. Monday morning marked her first real venture back into the city since she'd moved in. She stepped out of the building and inhaled the crisp air, hailing a cab before hesitation could take root. The address Beth had sent led her deep into a quieter district, far removed from corporate towers and luxury boutiques. The cafe looked unremarkable: narrow frontage, weathered signage, muted windows. Inside, only a handful of patrons occupied scattered tables, their conversations blending into a low hum. Evelyn approached the counter, nerves tightening slightly as the barista lifted his gaze. "I'm here to meet a Mr. Reynolds," she said, as instructed. He nodded once, gesturing toward the far end of the room. "Through that door, down the corridor, left turn. Blue door." Her steps slowed as she followed the directions, awareness sharpening with each footfall. If Beth hadn't personally vetted this opportunity, Evelyn wouldn't have entertained the meeting at all. The secrecy alone was enough to raise alarms. The blue door opened into a minimalist meeting room. 2 suited men were already waiting. They stood as she entered, professionalism etched into their expressions. Introductions were brief, formalities crisp. The conversation that followed unfolded with calculated efficiency. Scope, security protocols, timelines, confidentiality measures. The papers they slid across the table bore legal language dense enough to intimidate most, but Evelyn read each line carefully before signing. By the time the meeting concluded, a sense of cautious exhilaration thrummed through her veins. The work would be largely remote. A custom-built workstation would be delivered within 48 hours. Secure servers, encrypted channels, absolute discretion. As she stepped back into the sunlight, the weight pressing against her chest for days finally loosened. She didn't take a cab home. Instead, she wandered, letting the city unfold around her, pausing at a small bistro for lunch, savoring the novelty of choosing where to sit, what to order, how long to linger. Yet even as her shoulders relaxed, a subtle unease threaded through her awareness. Once, twice, 3 times. She glanced back, sensing movement just beyond her peripheral vision, the faint impression of being watched lingering stubbornly behind her. Each time the street appeared ordinary. Pedestrians, traffic, noise. Still, the feeling persisted. Nathaniel stared at the glowing screen before him without seeing a single word. The past week had carved shadows beneath his eyes, dulled the sharp precision he prided himself on. His jaw was rough with stubble, his suits hanging looser against a body that had forgotten routine in the face of obsession. No matter how deeply he dug, Evelyn had vanished. His security team, assembled from the best in the business, had returned nothing but dead ends and digital ghosts. No credit card traces, no hotel records, no transportation logs. It was as though she had dissolved into thin air. The frustration gnawed at him relentlessly. Then his phone rang. He snatched it up before the second vibration. "Sir," came the voice on the other end, taut with urgency. "We found her." Adrenaline surged through his veins, cold and electric. "Where?" he demanded. Coordinates followed. By the time the call ended, Nathaniel was already moving, storming from his office with singular focus. Finally. Chapter 8. Eve. Nathaniel's voice cut through the morning air with brutal familiarity as she came out of her building. Evelyn froze mid-step, one hand already reaching for the building's glass door behind her. For a heartbeat, she considered pretending she hadn't heard him. For another, she imagined walking inside and letting security handle it. But the sound of him, the simple, devastating certainty of that single syllable, anchored her in place. She turned. He was leaning against the sleek black body of his car, one hand buried in his pocket, the other loosely gripping his phone. His suit was perfectly tailored, his posture deceptively relaxed, yet the illusion of control couldn't fully mask the strain etched into his features. The dark circles beneath his eyes, the tight set of his jaw, the restless tension coiled through his body, all of it spoke of sleepless nights and relentless obsession. 10 days, that was all the freedom she'd been granted. She exhaled slowly, a quiet resignation settling into her bones. Part of her had known this moment would come. Ever since that day outside the cafe, when unease had prickled at her skin without reason, she'd felt the invisible net drawing closer. "You've been ignoring my calls," Nathaniel said, pushing himself upright and striding toward her, the faint curve of triumph tugging at his lips. It was the smile of a man who believed he had regained control of the situation. "I was ignoring your existence," Evelyn replied calmly. The smile vanished. For a fraction of a second, raw shock crossed his face, swiftly replaced by irritation. "We need to talk. We can talk in court." Anger flared in his eyes, sharp and volatile. He took another step closer, lowering his voice as if intimacy could bridge the distance she had carved between them. "Eve, please," he said, urgency creeping in despite his effort to remain composed. "I need to explain what happened. I made a mistake." She watched him carefully, studying the familiar lines of his face as though she were seeing them for the first time. "I admit it," Nathaniel continued, words spilling faster now. "I slept with Betrayal, but it meant nothing. It was purely physical. The only woman I've ever truly loved is you." A hollow sound escaped her throat, something between a laugh and a breath. It made him falter. "You have to understand," he pressed on, his confidence slowly rebuilding. "All men in our circle are like this. It's normal. Betrayal was just a distraction. You're my wife, and nothing will change that." The casual certainty in his tone made nausea twist through her. She searched his face, trying to locate even a trace of shame, of regret, of genuine accountability. Instead, she found entitlement, expectation, the unshakable belief that her place was fixed, immovable, regardless of how deeply he wounded her. "Do you honestly think this is normal?" she asked quietly. "That I should just accept it?" "Evelyn," he said, softening his voice, reaching out as if he might touch her. "I'll handle Betrayal. I'll be more careful. I promise I won't mess things up again." Her gaze sharpened. "Won't mess with me again," she echoed. "So as long as I don't find out, you're free to do whatever you want?" "That's not what I meant. Your mistress is pregnant," she cut in, her voice rising despite her restraint. "For God's sake." Something shifted in his expression. Not guilt but calculation. "I know," he said carefully. But maybe that isn't such a bad thing. We tried for years. This is an opportunity. It'll carry my blood. Her breath left her in a rush. Are you saying you expect me to raise the child you conceived through an affair? He winced. You don't have to phrase it like that. How would you like me to phrase it? She demanded. Adoption. Silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating. Then she laughed. A sharp, fractured sound that startled even her. The absurdity of the moment pressed down on her chest until it ached. I won't stand here and listen to any more of this, she said, voice trembling with restrained fury. You disgust me. Without waiting for a response, she turned and marched toward the curb, hailing the first cab that slowed. She slipped inside before Nathaniel could react, the door slamming shut like the final punctuation to a chapter of her life. As the car pulled away, she closed her eyes, the city blurred past, but the image of him remained, burned into her mind. Not the man she had loved, but the stranger he had revealed himself to be. Was this really the man she had given 6 years of her life to? The question echoed unanswered in the hollow space inside her chest. Chapter 9. Sir, she refuses to eat without you. Nathaniel closed his eyes slowly, pressing 2 fingers to his temples as the nurse's voice crackled through the phone. A dull headache throbbed behind his eyes, the familiar pressure of exhaustion and irritation tightening his skull. For days now, Betrayal had clung to him like a second skin, summoning him with every fabricated discomfort, every imagined symptom, every tremor of unease that she insisted could harm the baby. Harsh words only brought tears. Tears led to hysterics. Hysterics, the doctors warned, were dangerous. I'll be there in a few, he said curtly, ending the call before she could respond. He shoved back from his desk and stood, dragging a hand through his hair. Evelyn still hadn't answered a single one of his calls. Not one. It felt unnatural, wrong, like losing a limb he had never imagined himself without. Betrayal's presence only sharpened that absence, her constant demands and fragile performance grating against his nerves until everything inside him felt raw and volatile. By the time he reached the hospital room, his patience was already threadbare. Nate, you're here. Betrayal's face lit up the moment she saw him, her lips curving into a bright, practiced smile as she pushed herself upright against the pillows. One hand drifted instinctively to her stomach, the gesture tender, theatrical. Why aren't you eating? He asked, irritation bleeding through his tone. Her smile faltered just slightly before she masked it again. The baby missed you, she said softly. Something in his chest loosened unwillingly. He moved closer, settling into the chair beside her bed. Betrayal seized the opening immediately, launching into an eager monologue about nursery colors, hand-painted murals, imported cribs, organic baby clothes shipped in from Europe. Her voice fluttered excitedly, climbing higher and higher, every sentence steeped in fantasy. It grated against him. Nate, I was thinking. I'll stop you right there. The abruptness of his interruption cut her off mid-breath. She blinked, startled. Don't start dreaming about some cozy life with the baby, he said flatly, his gaze sharpening. You're carrying my child, not replacing my wife. Evelyn will come around. And when she does, she'll raise the baby. The cruelty in his tone was deliberate, calculated. Only Evelyn deserves to be the mother of my child. You'll be compensated, of course. The words landed like a slap. Tears welled instantly in Betrayal's eyes. What are you saying? She whispered, her voice trembling. Nate, we're going to be a family. You, me, and the baby. That's what you promised. He scoffed. Your delusion astounds me. Her breath hitched, a broken sound tearing from her throat. You can't do this to me. I love you. I'm carrying your baby. I never said I loved you, he cut in coldly. He stood, already turning toward the door. Behind him, Betrayal's sobs escalated, the sound raw and frantic, but he didn't stop. He had taken only a few steps when her cries sharpened into something else, something panicked, something wrong. Nate! He spun around just in time to see her slide off the bed, crumpling onto the floor. She clutched her stomach, her face drained of color, body curling in on itself as she whimpered. The room erupted into chaos. Nurses rushed in. A doctor followed. Hands lifted her, voices barked orders, curtains were drawn. Nathaniel stood frozen near the door, his mind blank, his chest tight. The doctor brushed past him moments later, fury blazing in his eyes. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he hissed. "I told you she needs absolute emotional stability. Do you understand how dangerous stress is right now?" He didn't wait for an answer. Nathaniel stared at the closed curtain, at the indistinct shape of Brielle's sedated body beyond it, and released a slow, weary breath. He needed Evelyn. Her steadiness. Her restraint. Her quiet presence that grounded him, even when he refused to admit it. Without her, everything felt like it was slipping out of control. Evelyn stepped into the lobby of her building, exhaustion dragging at her limbs, her mind still echoing with the sterile quiet of the day. It was nearly 11, the marble floors gleaming under dimmed lights, the security desk temporarily vacant. She was halfway to the elevator bank when arms suddenly wrapped around her from behind. Her body reacted before her mind could. She gasped, twisting sharply, shoving the weight off her as she stumbled backward. Her heel caught, barely regaining her balance. Nathaniel! He stood a few feet away, swaying slightly. His suit was rumpled, jacket crooked, tie loose around his neck. His eyes were bloodshot, his face drawn and hollow, the careful polish he always maintained entirely absent. "What the hell are you doing here?" she demanded, her heart pounding. "How did you even get inside?" He didn't answer. Instead, he surged toward her again, his arms reaching, clumsy and desperate. She tried to sidestep, but he caught her wrist, yanking her into him. His face buried against her neck, his breath hot and uneven as sloppy kisses grazed her skin. "I miss you," he murmured. "God, I miss you so much, Eve." Her stomach churned. She shoved at his chest, panic flaring. "Get off me." He stumbled but didn't release her, his grip tightening as his mouth brushed her collarbone. His hands roamed without permission, searching, grasping, entitled. "I know I was wrong," he slurred. "I've thought about it. I can't live without you. I just need you back." The man she once loved felt foreign in her arms, heavy and invasive. Fear climbed her spine, her breath coming shallow. "Get off me," she screamed, pushing with all her strength. It did nothing. He leaned into her again, his voice dropping into something coaxing and dangerous. "What if we had a baby, Eve? Just us. We could start over." Her blood ran cold. And then in the blink of an eye, everything changed. One moment Nathaniel's weight pinned her, and the next, he was airborne. His body arced violently through the air before slamming into the marble floor several feet away, the sound of impact echoing through the empty lobby. He lay still, unconscious. Evelyn stood frozen, breath locked in her lungs, her mind struggling to process what she just witnessed. A man stood between her and Nathaniel, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a long black coat, his stance solid, immovable. His chest rose and fell slowly, power coiled in every line of his body. He turned, her breath left her in a sharp gasp. Dominic. Chapter 10. Dominic's eyes widened the moment he took a proper look at her. He had reacted on instinct alone. A woman cornered, a man overpowering her, the unmistakable body language of danger. He had stepped in without hesitation, his fist and momentum acting before his mind could catch up. Now recognition struck. "Fuck," he muttered under his breath, glancing at the unconscious man sprawled across the marble. "It's Nate. That stupid kid." He pulled out his phone and walked several steps away, lowering his voice. Evelyn couldn't hear what he said, only the clipped authority in his tone, the way the words were delivered like orders, not requests. Minutes later, two men in black suits strode into the lobby with military efficiency. Without a word, they lifted Nathaniel as though he weighed nothing, his head lolling limply as they carried him out through the front doors. Evelyn's chest tightened. Despite everything, the betrayal, the harassment, the humiliation, seeing him like that unsettled her. He looked small, breakable, nothing like the man who had once made her feel safe. Dominic spoke briefly to the security guard at the desk, his tone low but firm. The guard nodded repeatedly, posture stiff with obedience. When Dominic returned, Evelyn was still standing where she had frozen, her body slow to remember how to move. He pressed the elevator button. The doors slid open with a soft chime. She stepped inside silently, standing near the mirrored wall, her reflection pale and distant. She knew she should thank him. The words hovered somewhere behind her lips, tangled in shock and exhaustion. Dominic joined her, the space inside the elevator filling with his quiet, imposing presence. He glanced sideways at her, one dark brow lifting an unspoken question. "I live here," she said suddenly, the words escaping before she had time to weigh them. Surprise flickered across his face, brief but unmistakable. "I'm divorcing Nathaniel," she added quietly. For a fraction of a second, his composure cracked. His eyes widened, then sharpened, something unreadable crossing his features before he cleared his throat. "Good." Her head snapped toward him. "Good." The bluntness of it hit harder than cruelty ever could. She stared at him incredulous, a sharp sting blooming behind her ribs. "Good." As if the dissolution of her marriage, the collapse of her entire life, were a fortunate development. He caught her expression and exhaled, a corner of his mouth lifting into something wry. "He doesn't deserve you," he said simply, shoulders shifting in a casual shrug. The words landed wrong, too abrupt, too unguarded. Hurt flared instinctively. It was no secret his family disliked her, but hearing such bald dismissal from him, of all people, twisted something in her chest. It felt like confirmation of everything she had endured in that house, the silent judgments, the subtle exclusions, the persistent reminder that she did not belong. The elevator rose in heavy silence. Numbers glowed, ticking upward. When the doors slid open onto her floor, she stepped out without looking back. "Evelyn." His voice stopped her. She turned. "Nathaniel won't be able to come inside anymore," he said. "You're safe here." The doors closed on the last word. Evelyn stood motionless in the quiet hallway, her heart thudding unevenly. The reassurance had been delivered without softness, without ceremony, and yet it struck deeper than any comfort she had ever been offered. "You're safe." No one had ever said that to her. Not when she married into a ruthless dynasty. Not when she swallowed humiliation for the sake of peace. Not when she rebuilt herself from betrayal. She had always survived alone. Her vision blurred. She blinked hard, steadying herself before unlocking her door, the emotional weight of the night finally crashing over her in full. As she stepped inside, Dominic's words echoed in her mind, colliding with his earlier statement, with the sharp certainty in his voice. "He doesn't deserve you." Had she misunderstood? Did he know something about Nathaniel that she didn't? Or had he meant that she was simply too good for him? For the first time in days, Evelyn realized she no longer understood the world she was standing in. And that terrified her. Chapter 11. Nathaniel woke to the kind of hangover that felt lethal. His skull throbbed with a vicious, pulsing ache, light stabbing behind his closed eyelids. His tongue felt thick, his throat raw, his limbs heavy as stone. For several disoriented seconds, he lay completely still, trying to anchor himself in reality. Something was wrong. The ceiling above him wasn't the sleek matte gray of his penthouse bedroom. It was cream-colored, ornate, faintly cracked at the edges, a ceiling he hadn't stared at since his teenage years. Slowly, carefully, he sat up. The room swam before his eyes. Heavy velvet curtains, dark antique furniture, framed oil paintings along the walls. His childhood bedroom, his parents' estate. A low curse scraped from his throat. Memory refused to cooperate. The night before existed only as broken flashes, neon lights, too many drinks, a hand gripping his collar, the distant echo of shouting. And then nothing. He pushed himself out of bed, each movement punished by the violent pounding in his head, and staggered toward the door. The sound of voices drifted down the corridor, unfamiliar in both tone and context. Female. Light. Almost cheerful. That alone was unsettling. The moment he stepped into the living room, the scene before him froze him in place. His mother, Rowena Blackwood, sat comfortably on the sofa, her posture relaxed, her expression animated in a way he rarely saw. Across from her sat Betrayal. Not perched nervously. Not hovering awkwardly. Comfortable. Intimate. Laughing softly as she spoke, one manicured hand resting delicately against the slight curve of her abdomen. "The morning sickness is awful," Betrayal was saying, her voice threaded with theatrical discomfort and glowing anticipation. "But the joy of knowing there's a little life growing inside me makes it all worthwhile." Rowena smiled warmly, nodding along. "That's simply wonderful, dear. The Blackwood family could certainly use more little ones. It's been far too long since this house heard the sound of children." Nathaniel's stomach dropped. Every instinct in him recoiled at the sight. The ease, the familiarity, the way Brielle leaned in as though she already belonged there. Rowena's gaze lifted then, brightening as she spotted him. "Nathaniel!" she exclaimed, rising from the sofa. "You're awake just in time. I was just discussing baby plans with Brielle." Something inside him went cold. He took in the scene again, Brielle's glowing smile, her possessive hand over her belly, his mother's openly welcoming demeanor, and felt a surge of pure, visceral resentment. "Mom," he said flatly, "I need to speak with you. Alone." The warmth drained from Brielle's face. "Nathaniel," she interjected quickly, rising as well, her eyes already shimmering, "don't shut me out. We need to have an honest conversation about the baby. About us." His gaze snapped to her, hard and merciless. "I've already told you my plans regarding the child," he said coldly. "I will raise it with my wife. You will get the fuck out of my life." Rowena gasped softly. Brielle's lips trembled. Her complexion drained, turning ashen. "Nate, you can't mean that. I love you. I love you and I love our child." "Love?" He cut in sharply, a cruel laugh scraping from his chest. "If you truly loved me, you wouldn't have tormented my wife. I told you explicitly, never to let her find out about us. But you said you loved me too." Brielle cried, her composure fracturing. "You told me Evelyn meant nothing to you. You said you were only staying with her for appearances." "I lied." The word landed with brutal finality. Her breath hitched. "I told you exactly what you wanted to hear," he continued, unblinking. "Nothing more." Rowena's face hardened, fury bleeding into her features. "Nathaniel, how can you be so heartless? There are rumors circulating. The entire Blackwood family is whispering about your marriage. If you marry Brielle now, it will silence everything. It will restore order." "I will not divorce Evelyn," he said, his voice steady and merciless. "And I will never marry her." Rowena stiffened. "But the baby? I've already made my position clear." His gaze slid back to Brielle, slow and deliberate, his expression curling into something cruel. "Did you really think you'd become Mrs. Blackwood by driving Eve away?" A sob tore from her throat. He laughed softly. "Mark my words, that will never happen." Her composure collapsed entirely. She sank back onto the sofa, shoulders shaking, quiet wails breaking from her chest. Nathaniel turned away. Without another word, he strode toward the exit, his footsteps echoing through the grand halls of the estate. Behind him, his mother's voice called his name, sharp with outrage and disbelief, but he didn't slow. By the time he reached the front doors, his jaw was clenched so tightly it ached. Evelyn would not leave him. Not for this. Not for anyone. And if Brielle thought she could fracture his life, his marriage, his control, she had catastrophically misjudged her place. Chapter 12. Evelyn dressed with deliberate care. Every movement was precise, almost ritualistic, the crisp slide of silk against skin, the smooth click of cufflinks, the gentle tug as she straightened the collar of her tailored blazer. She paused before the mirror longer than necessary, studying her reflection with a mixture of nerves and quiet pride. Today wasn't just another meeting. It was her first official visit to the office. The realization sent a thrill skittering through her chest, bright and unfamiliar. For as long as she could remember, she had imagined herself in spaces like these, glass-walled boardrooms, polished marble floors, the hum of ambition vibrating beneath everything. Even as a child, she had loved the idea of work. Loved the structure, the purpose, the promise that her effort could shape something tangible. That was why she had worked harder than everyone else in college. Why she'd stayed up through endless nights, fueled by cold coffee and stubborn resolve. And then she had met Nathaniel. A wry smile curved her lips as she fastened her watch. God, how stupid she had been, willingly trading a future she had built with her own hands for a shallow socialite existence, convincing herself it was love, that sacrifice was noble. Shaking her head, she grabbed her bag and stepped out of her apartment. As she exited the building, her smile vanished instantly. Nathaniel stood just outside the building entrance, immaculate as always, his expression bright, almost hopeful. Unease coiled low in her stomach. Last night's chaos flashed through her mind. The confrontation, the humiliation, the violence barely restrained. Seeing him here so suddenly felt like a violation of the fragile calm she'd managed to reclaim. "Eve." His voice broke the morning stillness. For a fleeting second, something real flickered in his eyes, recognition, longing, before it clouded into nervous uncertainty. She didn't answer. Without slowing, she moved to sidestep him. "Wait." He stepped into her path, urgency sharpening his tone. "I brought you breakfast." He lifted the bag, angling it so she could see inside. Her favorite breakfast sandwich. From the tiny cafe near their college dorms, the one they used to frequent during late study sessions and lazy mornings, back when laughter came easily and promises still felt sacred. "I don't need it." Her voice was cool, distant. "Please move aside." The word struck him harder than he expected. Not wait, not listen, just move. Memories surged, her delighted squeal when he surprised her with snacks, the way she'd throw her arms around his neck, scolding him for spoiling her while already reaching for the bag. The soft kiss she pressed to his cheek before taking her first bite. When had that girl disappeared? When had warmth turned into ice? "Eve, I know you're upset, but..." I said move aside. The finality in her tone left no room for argument. A dull ache spread through his chest, but he refused to step back. His gaze drifted over her outfit, the sharp tailoring, the quiet authority stitched into every line. Confusion crossed his face. "Where are you going?" Then realization struck. "Wait." A laugh burst from him, incredulous and sharp. "Are you going to work?" She didn't respond. He scoffed. "Who's going to hire a housewife?" The word landed with deliberate cruelty. Evelyn turned slowly, studying him, really looking, and for the first time the immaturity she had long ignored stood exposed. When he didn't get his way, he didn't reason. He belittled. He bullied. "I may have given up my career for your sake," she said quietly, stepping closer, her voice low and dangerous. "But don't forget something, Nathaniel." Her eyes locked onto his. "Your billion-dollar empire stands on my shoulders. My work. And I still own the patent." His breath caught. "Want me to sue you for losses?" Her smile was razor-thin. The color drained from his face. For a moment he could only stare at her, shock stripping him of speech. She watched the realization dawn, slow, horrifying. As he finally grasped how precarious his position truly was, she scoffed softly, stepping past him. She flagged down a taxi without looking back. 3 years ago, fresh out of graduation, she had created a breakthrough logistics optimization system. A framework so efficient it had the potential to reshape the entire industry. Investors had circled instantly. One firm had even offered $30 million outright for the patent. But Nathaniel had convinced her. "Let me handle it, Eve. I'll build it into something huge. We'll do it together." Together. She trusted him. Let him integrate the system into Black logistics, allowing his struggling empire to skyrocket almost overnight, all while carefully retaining ownership of the patent itself. Thank God for that single shred of foresight, because if she ever pulled that software, Black logistics would grind to a screeching halt. The thought settled in her chest, heavy and dark, not with guilt but with vindication. For the first time in years she felt powerful. Chapter 13. Nathaniel stormed into his office, slamming the door so hard the glass panels rattled. "Cancel my meetings," he snapped, shrugging out of his coat and tossing it onto the couch. "I don't want to be disturbed." His assistant barely managed a nod before scrambling away. Nathaniel dropped into his chair. Hands braced against the desk as he stared blankly at the polished surface. Evelyn's face rose unbidden in his mind, the cool dismissal in her eyes, the sharp cut of her words, the effortless way she had stripped him of power and left him standing there like a fool. He clenched his jaw. All through their relationship she had been gentle, soft-spoken, willing to bend. That was what he had loved about her. The way she yielded, the way she needed him. Beneath her brilliance he had seen loneliness, vulnerability, a quiet craving for affection. And it had made him feel invincible. Needed. Now the cold indifference in her gaze felt like a slap, threatening him. The thought curdled into fury. A knock sounded at the door. "Come in," he said sharply, not bothering to look up. The door opened and Brielle stepped inside. She was carefully put together, soft curls, subtle makeup, a flowing green dress that clung delicately to her frame. In her hands was a folded medical report. "Nathaniel," she said quietly, approaching the desk. "I had a checkup today. The baby is very healthy." She placed the paper before him. He barely glanced at it. "I told you not to appear in front of me again," he said coldly. The word struck. Hurt flickered across her face before she masked it, her fingers tightening around the edge of the desk. "I just thought you should know," she murmured. "It's your child. Is there anything else?" His voice was flat, distant. Her composure wavered. "Nathaniel, why are you treating me like this?" Her voice trembled. "I'm carrying your baby. You don't even look at me anymore." Tears welled in her eyes, slipping down her cheeks. The sight stirred something restless and uneasy in his chest. Not affection, not guilt, but a faint echo of how he used to handle Evelyn when she cried. Soft words. Gentle reassurances. Promises. Brielle mistook the hesitation. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I know your heart belongs to Evelyn. I never tried to replace her. I just love you." Her hand drifted to her stomach, fingers splaying protectively. "Even if you never love me back, I'll still give you this child." She stood close enough now that her perfume wrapped around him, sweet and cloying. The green of her dress, too familiar, triggered a sharp flash of memory. Evelyn. College mornings. Sunlight. Laughter. Something dark snapped inside him. Without warning, he grabbed Brielle, pulling her against him. Surprise flickered across her face before anticipation replaced it. "Nate!" He cut her off, lips crashing down on hers, his grip harsh, desperate. It wasn't tenderness driving him. It was fury, frustration, the gnawing need to prove something to himself, to erase Evelyn's indifference. Their movements turned frantic, disordered, as if he were trying to outrun the thoughts clawing at his mind. Brielle clung to him, breath hitching, murmuring his name, urging him closer. The sound of their heavy breaths and loud moans filled the room. "Gentler," Brielle murmured. "Shut up," he growled. He never noticed how different her voice was Evelyn's. Hers was high-pitched and grating while Evelyn's was soft and comforting. They clawed at each other, desperation mounting. But even in the chaos, his mind betrayed him. He shut his eyes. "Eve!" The name slipped from his lips, raw and unguarded. Brielle stiffened. For a fraction of a second, her expression twisted. Not with pain, but with something far darker. Hatred. She said nothing, only tightening her hold, letting him believe whatever lie he needed. And as Nathaniel lost himself in the illusion of another woman, Brielle lay beneath him, eyes open, heart burning. This wasn't over. Not even close. Chapter 14. The meeting had gone effortlessly. Evelyn sat across from the project leads, answering questions with calm precision, her ideas unfolding smoothly, naturally, as if she had never stepped away from this world. They listened, took notes, exchanged impressed glances. More than once, she caught someone nodding thoughtfully as she spoke. When it ended, she was given a brief tour of the office. It wasn't large, but it was stylish: glass partitions, clean lines, muted lighting softened by warm accents. The hum of focused productivity filled the space, keyboards clicking, low conversations drifting through the air. The staff were polite, professional, and noticeably respectful when she was introduced. For the first time in years, her chest felt full. During the tour, they mentioned their elusive boss several times, referring to him only in vague terms. She found it strange but didn't press. Whoever he was, he clearly preferred to remain invisible. By the time she returned home, a lightness followed her steps. She changed into comfortable clothes, tidied the apartment, did a small load of laundry, and answered a few emails. Work flowed easily, her mind sharp, focused, alive in a way it hadn't been in a very long time. As dusk settled over the city, her phone rang. "Bethany." Evelyn smiled as she answered. "Hey." They exchanged their usual greetings, light banter softening the edges of the day. But something in Bethany's pauses felt off. A fractional hesitation, barely perceptible, yet unmistakable. Evelyn stilled. "What is it, Beth?" A soft sigh sounded on the other end. "Remember the lawyer I hired to handle your divorce?" Evelyn hummed, her fingers tightening slightly around the phone. "He brought in a private investigator," Bethany continued, "to dig into Nathaniel, to secure concrete evidence." Evelyn's pulse ticked faster. "And Another pause. I think you should see what he found. Her phone chimed. Evelyn opened the message. The world tilted. It was Nathaniel, dressed in the same suit he'd worn that morning. Same tie, same watch. And Brielle. The images were grainy, taken from a distance but painfully unmistakable. The angle, the office, the way his hand curved around her waist, the intimate tilt of their bodies. Her breath hitched, sharp and involuntary. Just hours ago, he had stood in front of her building pleading, apologizing, claiming regret, and then he had gone straight back to betrayal. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let the tears fall. Eve. Bethany's voice sounded faint. Are you still there? Yes. She cleared her throat, forcing steadiness into her tone. I'm here. Are you okay? Yes, she said again, the word hollow. Honestly, I'm not even surprised. Part of her meant it. And yet the hurt still carved deep. How's the divorce proceeding going? Evelyn asked quietly. A heavy sigh. That's the problem. The court keeps rejecting the filings. We're almost certain it's Nathaniel's influence. Of course. He was stalling, trapping her, refusing to release control. I'm so tired, Beth, Evelyn murmured, exhaustion seeping into every syllable. I know, babe, Bethany replied gently, but we'll get you out. I promise. They spoke a little longer about logistics, about timelines, about nothing important at all, just enough to soften the ache before disconnecting. Evelyn lowered the phone. Her apartment felt suddenly too small, too quiet. She had done everything right. Sold the jewelry, liquidated the designer wardrobe, secured her independence, built a new life from the ground up. And yet he still loomed, a shadow she couldn't outrun. She needed air. Without thinking too much, she grabbed her coat and keys and left. The bar was dim, warm and loud, exactly what she wanted. She ordered one drink, then another, then another. The burn dulled the ache. The noise blurred the edges of her thoughts. Laughter bubbled up, sudden and hysterical, startling even herself. For a few hours she forgot. She forgot betrayal, forgot humiliation, forgot the suffocating grip of a marriage that refused to die. After midnight, she stumbled back onto the street, heels unsteady beneath her feet, the city lights streaking and shimmering around her. She laughed again, too loud, too sharp, as she fumbled with the keypad lock of the building entrance. It flashed red a third time. She tried again. And again. Her balance wavered. The world tipped. There was a brief sensation of falling, of weightlessness, of surrender, before everything dissolved into black. Chapter 15. Dominic returned home well past midnight. The day had been long, the meetings relentless, his mind still tangled in figures and projections as his car rolled to a stop outside his building. He cut the engine and handed the key to the valet, already loosening his tie, when movement near the entrance caught his attention. A woman stood by the main door, fumbling clumsily with the lock. For a split second, alarm flickered through him. Break-ins were rare in this building, but not impossible. His steps slowed, senses sharpening as he drew closer. Then recognition struck. Evelyn. She swayed slightly, her posture unsteady. One hand braced against the wall while the other struggled uselessly with the lock. Confusion knitted his brows together. What was she doing out so late? And more importantly, what state was she in? He had just opened his mouth to speak when her body tipped backward. Instinct took over. He surged forward, catching her mid-fall, her weight slamming into his chest. Her head lolled against his shoulder, a soft breath ghosting across his collarbone. Evelyn, he muttered sharply, tightening his grip. She didn't respond. For a moment he simply stood there, holding her, the reality of the situation settling in. Up close, she looked nothing like the composed woman he had seen in passing. Her lashes lay dark against her cheeks, her lips faintly parted, skin warm beneath his hands. He noticed faint freckles dusting the bridge of her nose, a detail so delicate it made something in his chest tighten unexpectedly. Damn it! He muttered under his breath. He unlocked the door and maneuvered them inside, her weight sagging fully against him. She was utterly incapable of standing on her own. Lifting her carefully, he cradled her against his chest and headed for the elevators, pressing the button for the 5th floor, the one he remembered her selecting before. When the doors slid open, reality greeted him with an immediate problem. He had no idea which apartment was hers. Evelyn, he tried again, his voice low but firm. Which one is yours? A soft murmur escaped her lips, incoherent, her fingers curling faintly into his shirt as if anchoring herself. He exhaled slowly. Calling management would take time. Waking security would raise questions. And leaving her alone in the hallway was out of the question. After a brief hesitation, he stepped back into the elevator and pressed the button for the penthouse. Once inside his apartment, he set her carefully on the couch and loosened his tie, unbuttoning his collar as he took a long pull of water in the kitchen. His gaze drifted back to her, sprawled in unconscious disarray across expensive leather. What exactly had she been trying to drown tonight? He shook his head, deciding to give her a few minutes before figuring out the logistics of returning her downstairs. He just stepped out of the shower, towel slung low around his waist, hair still damp, when he froze. His heart skipped as his eyes snapped toward the bed. There she was, sprawled on the edge of his bed, her coat discarded, black dress clinging to her like a second skin, her posture loose and careless in a way that set every nerve in his body on alert. "Christ," he muttered. "You're not sleeping there." Crossing the room in long strides, he hauled her upright, slinging her easily over his shoulder despite her faint protest. She squirmed, a soft, incoherent sound escaping her lips, her bare thigh brushing his side. He very deliberately focused on the far wall. Back in the living room, he lowered her toward the couch, and that was when everything unraveled. Her arms looped suddenly around his neck, her body surging upward on unsteady heels. Before he could react, her lips crashed into his. Warm, soft, tasting faintly of chocolate and liquor. A startled sound left him as his instincts betrayed him, his hands tightening reflexively at her waist. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to heat, breath, and the fragile woman clinging to him like he was the only solid thing left. Then reality slammed back. He pulled away sharply, gripping her shoulders, forcing distance between them. No, her eyes lifted to his, glassy, unfocused, heartbreakingly raw. Her hair was mussed, lipstick smudged, lashes clumped together by tears she hadn't even noticed falling. At that moment she could have undone far stronger men. "I'm putting you down," he said firmly. "You're going to sleep this off. Understood?" Her lips trembled. Then she broke. "You're such a bastard, Nathaniel." His body went rigid. "I hate you so much," she sobbed, fists beating weakly against his chest. "Why won't you just let me go?" The words punched the air from his lungs. "You say you love me," she slurred, voice cracking, "and then you turn around and sleep with your mistress." Something cold and dangerous stirred inside him. So that was it. His jaw tightened, fury threading through him, not for himself but for her. His hold loosened and she collapsed forward, pressing her face against his chest, arms winding around him in desperate instinct. He was acutely aware of every point of contact, her cheek against his chest, her fingers curling into the bare skin of his back, the warmth of her body sinking into his. "I'll find someone else to love me," she whispered brokenly. "So just let me go, okay?" The ache that bloomed in his chest caught him off guard. For several long seconds he stood there, holding her while she trembled, letting her tears soak silently into his skin. Finally, gently, he disentangled her arms and lifted her again, this time carefully, reverently, carrying her back to the bedroom. He laid her down, drawing the covers over her slight frame, tucking her in with a care that surprised even himself. She sighed softly and slipped back into sleep. Dominic grabbed clean clothes, casting one last look at her before quietly closing the door behind him. Tonight the couch would have to suffice. Chapter 16. Evelyn woke with the uneasy sensation of being unmoored. For a moment, she lay still, her breath shallow, her body braced for danger she couldn't yet name. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar. Too high, too clean, washed in pale morning light that filtered through sheer curtains. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something sharper beneath it, clean and masculine. Her heart began to race. She pushed herself upright, the movement sending a sharp spike of pain through her skull. A groan slipped past her lips as she pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to piece together the fragments of the night before. Rain. Lights. A door that wouldn't open. Then nothing. Panic surged. Her gaze darted around the room. The bed was wide, the linens dark and expensive, tucked with military precision. The furniture was minimalist, restrained. All clean lines and muted tones. Nothing personal. Nothing soft. This was a man's bedroom. A cold wash of dread slid down her spine. She scrambled to check herself. Her dress was still on, rumpled but intact. Her coat lay discarded near the door. Nothing felt wrong, nothing hurt. That realization steadied her breathing just enough to keep the fear from spiraling out of control. Still, unease lingered. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and stood, just as a knock sounded at the door. "Are you up?" The voice was unmistakably male. Low, calm, controlled. Her stomach clenched. Before she could answer, the door eased open and a familiar face appeared in the gap. Dominic. Her breath left her in a startled gasp. She sprang backward, nearly tripping over the edge of the mattress. "You." His brows lifted faintly, more in surprise than offense. "Good. You're awake." He opened the door fully and stepped inside. He wasn't wearing a suit. The realization struck her with disproportionate force. Instead, he stood there in a fitted black t-shirt and dark sweatpants, his hair still damp, his jaw roughened with faint stubble. The sharp, intimidating edge she associated with Dominic Blackwood was softened. Not gone but muted like a blade sheathed. Her voice came out thin. "What happened? You passed out at the entrance last night." His tone was steady, factual. "I brought you up." Memory flickered, strong arms, warmth, the sensation of falling and then being caught. Her cheeks heated. "You can freshen up if you want," he added, gesturing to a door on the left. "Bathroom's there. I'm making breakfast." Breakfast. The word felt surreal. She nodded dumbly, muttered something that might have been thanks, and retreated into the bathroom before her thoughts could fully catch up with her reality. The mirror was merciless. Her hair was a tangled halo, mascara smudged beneath weary eyes, lipstick faded and uneven. She looked exactly how she felt, unraveled. God. She splashed cold water over her face, reined in the chaos as best she could, and changed nothing else. There were no spare clothes, no borrowed comfort, just her stripped down to quiet vulnerability. When she emerged, the apartment unfolded before her. The penthouse was vast, but not ostentatious. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the waking city. Pale stone counters gleamed beneath soft lighting. Everything was curated, precise, and understated. A space built for function rather than display. Dominic stood at the stove, sleeves pushed up, movements efficient and controlled. The sight of him cooking sent an odd twist through her chest. She approached hesitantly. "Sit," he said, sliding a plate toward the counter. Scrambled eggs. Toast. Avocado. Yogurt. Fresh juice. A real breakfast. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. Nathaniel had never cooked. Not once in 6 years. She pushed the thought away and began to eat, the silence between them oddly comfortable. Not empty, simply still. That was when he spoke. "How's the divorce proceeding going?" The question caught her mid-sip. She coughed, juice going down the wrong pipe, sputtering as she reached for a napkin. Dominic was instantly there, handing her paper towels without a word. When she finally caught her breath, her voice came out quiet. "The court keeps rejecting the filings." He nodded once, unsurprised. "Do you have proof of adultery?" Her fingers tightened around the glass. "Yes. Photos. Messages. Enough to bury him." Another nod. They ate in silence for a few moments more. Then calmly, as if suggesting a business strategy, he said, "Go to his mother. Threaten to expose him to my father." Her head snapped up. The idea hit with the force of revelation. Rowena Blackwood would never allow public disgrace. The Blackwood legacy mattered more than pride, more than loyalty, more than even Nathaniel himself. With proof in hand, Evelyn would hold the blade. Her shoulders loosened for the first time in days. She exhaled slowly. "That's brilliant." A faint curve touched his lips. They finished eating in companionable quiet. When she insisted on doing the dishes, he waved her off and she didn't argue. Some battles weren't worth fighting. At the door he hesitated. "I also have influence in the courts," he said quietly. "Probably more than he does." Her eyes widened. "I can't ask you to do that." "You didn't," he replied simply. "I offered." She looked at him, truly looked, and something inside her shifted. Not attraction. Safety. Reliability. "Thank you," she whispered. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, she stepped back into the world feeling like she wasn't carrying the weight alone. Chapter 17. The grocery store was too bright. Fluorescent lights reflected harshly off polished floors, turning every color sharp and unforgiving. The low murmur of voices, the distant beeping of scanners, the squeak of cart wheels. It all blended into a dull roar that pressed against Evelyn's skull. She gripped the handle of her trolley and focused on her list. Milk, eggs, bread, pasta. Normal things. Ordinary things. Proof that life still existed outside courtrooms and betrayal and sleepless nights. She had just turned into the produce aisle when she felt it. That instinctive tightening in her chest. The subtle shift in the air. The sense of being watched. Her fingers stiffened. Slowly she lifted her gaze. And there she was. Brielle. Perfect hair, glossy lips, a soft cream sweater hugging her rounded stomach. One manicured hand rested protectively over the small swell of her belly, as if it were a sacred offering to the world. For a moment, Evelyn simply stood there frozen. Then survival kicked in. She turned her trolley sharply and headed for the opposite aisle, heart thudding. She didn't want this. Didn't have the strength for this. All she wanted was to buy groceries and go home and exist in peace for 30 minutes. Her pace quickened. Almost there. Then, Evelyn. Her shoulders locked. The voice was honeyed. Sweet. Intimate. As if they were old friends who met by chance. She swallowed and kept walking. A shadow slid into her path. Brielle stood directly in front of her trolley, blocking the narrow space between shelves. Up close, she smelled faintly of vanilla and expensive perfume. "You're in such a hurry," Brielle said softly. "You didn't even say hello." Evelyn lifted her eyes, forcing calm into her expression. "Move." Brielle smiled. It was small, polite, cruel. "We're building a family," she said casually, stroking her stomach. "Nathaniel and I. You should see him lately, he's glowing. So excited." The words landed like tiny blades. Evelyn felt something sharp twist behind her eyes. "Rowena has been wonderful," Brielle continued. "She insists I come over every weekend. She's already planning the nursery. Cream and gold. Isn't that sweet?" Evelyn's breath came shallow. Rowena. The name alone tasted bitter. "I'm busy," she said, trying to edge past. Brielle shifted again, blocking her. "You always were so cold," she sighed. No wonder he needed someone warmer. Something pulsed violently at Evelyn's temple. Her vision blurred at the edges. She inhaled, slow and careful. "Don't react. Don't give her this." "I said move," she repeated, firmer now. Brielle's gaze flicked briefly to the growing number of shoppers around them, then back to Evelyn. Her lips curved, subtle and knowing. Evelyn jerked her trolley sideways, trying to force her way past. The cart clipped Brielle's leg. Brielle gasped. Then she fell. It was dramatic. Deliberate. Her body crumpled to the floor with a sharp cry, hands flying to her stomach. Instantly the aisle erupted. "Oh my God! Are you okay? Call someone." Brielle began to sob loud and broken. "My baby. Oh God, why would you push me? What did I ever do to you?" Every head turned. Every eye locked onto Evelyn. Her stomach dropped. "I didn't," she started, but the words drowned beneath the rising tide of voices. "What kind of monster does that to a pregnant woman? Disgusting. She should be arrested." A store employee rushed forward. Someone else crouched beside Brielle, offering water. Another shopper shot Evelyn a look of pure hatred. Heat flooded her face. Her throat closed. This wasn't happening. "I didn't push her," she said hoarsely, but her voice sounded thin even to her own ears. Brielle sobbed harder. "She hates me. She always has. She can't stand that Nathaniel chose me." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Evelyn felt herself shrinking beneath them. Humiliation burned through her veins. Her hands trembled so badly she had to clench them into fists. She backed away, heart pounding wildly, ears ringing. "I didn't," she whispered again, though no one listened. She turned and fled. Her footsteps echoed too loudly against the polished floor. She shoved through the exit doors, lungs burning, eyes stinging. Only when the cold air hit her face did she stop. She bent forward, bracing her hands on her knees, sucking in shallow breaths. Behind the glass, the crowd still hovered around Brielle. And then Brielle lifted her head. Their eyes met through the store window. And Brielle smiled. Small. Victorious. Evelyn's blood went cold. She straightened slowly, fury and helplessness tangling painfully in her chest. This wasn't over. Not even close. Chapter 18. The Blackwood estate rose before her like a fortress. Cold stone. Iron gates. Sweeping staircases and manicured gardens that screamed power, wealth and untouchability. Evelyn stood at the base of the wide marble steps and stared up at the massive front doors, her fingers tightening around the thick envelope clutched in her hand. Once, walking into this house had filled her with nervous hope. Once she had believed she could belong here. That girl was gone. She climbed the steps slowly, heels clicking with quiet authority. Each sound echoed far too loudly in the still morning air, as if announcing her arrival. The moment she reached the door, she didn't hesitate. She kicked it open. The heavy wood slammed violently against the wall, the crash reverberating through the mansion. Voices cut off inside. A gasp sounded. Someone dropped a glass. Evelyn stepped in. The grand foyer stretched before her in all its obscene luxury. Crystal chandelier, polished marble floors, sweeping staircase, gold inlays. Wealth designed to intimidate. Rowena Blackwood stood near the center, mid-conversation with one of the staff, her expression twisting from confusion into pure fury the second she saw who had dared breach her home like this. "Have you completely lost your mind?" Rowena shrieked. "How dare you barge in here?" Evelyn didn't slow, didn't blink, didn't waver. She crossed the marble floor with measured steps, stopping barely 3 feet in front of the older woman, close enough to see every expensive line of makeup, every diamond glinting at her throat, every carefully constructed illusion of superiority. "Good morning, Rowena," Evelyn said coolly. Rowena's face flushed crimson. "Get out of my house this instant." Evelyn lifted the envelope. Then she flipped it upside down. The photograph spilled out in a silent cascade, fluttering onto the polished floor like damning confetti. One after another. Nathaniel tangled in unfamiliar sheets. Nathaniel kissing Brielle against the door of a hotel room. Nathaniel pressed against her in an elevator. Nathaniel's hands on her hips. Their mouths locked. Their bodies entwined. Timestamps glared from the corners of the images. Dates. Locations. Clear damning proof. Rowena's tirade died mid-breath. Her gaze dropped. Her pupils contracted. The blood drained from her face. For a moment she simply stared. Then her hand trembled. What is this?" she whispered. "Evidence," Evelyn said softly. "Of your son's adultery." Rowena's breath came shallow. "This is fabricated. Do you think I'm stupid enough to believe?" "Every photo has a timestamp," Evelyn cut in. "Cross-reference with hotel security footage, building logs, and private investigator documentation. You could challenge it in court. You would lose." Silence slammed into the space. The house seemed to hold its breath. Rowena slowly lifted her head, fury blazing through the shock. "You filthy little opportunist. You set this up." "I didn't," Evelyn replied calmly. "He did." Repeatedly. Carelessly. Enthusiastically. Rowena's lips trembled. Evelyn took one deliberate step closer. "You have 48 hours, she said quietly. 2 days. I want the divorce finalized. No delays. No rejections. No legal games." Rowena's shock transformed into violent rage. "You think you can threaten me?" she shrieked. "You are nothing. An orphan. A nobody. A girl with no bloodline, no legacy, no family. Who do you think you are to challenge the Blackwoods?" The words were sharp, cruel, designed to wound. Once they would have shattered her. Now they slid off like dust. Evelyn smiled. It was slow, controlled, dangerous. "You're right," she said softly. "I have no powerful family, no famous lineage, no name that opens doors." She paused. "But I do have something far more valuable." Rowena's brows drew together. "My mind," Evelyn continued. "And proof." She crouched, gathering a few of the scattered photographs, straightening them carefully before slipping them back into the envelope. "While I'm at it," she added lightly. I'll also be filing a lawsuit against Black Logistics. Rowena stiffened. For what? The software infrastructure currently running your entire logistics network, Evelyn said. The one your son stole from me. Time froze. Rowena's face drained of its remaining color. Her eyes widened. Her lips parted. The air thickened with shock. You wouldn't, she whispered. I designed that system from scratch, Evelyn said. Every algorithm, every predictive model, every security layer. Nathaniel took my work and used it under the company without credit, compensation, or legal transfer. Rowena's hands began to tremble visibly. That software is the backbone of your global operations, Evelyn continued. Without it, your shipping efficiency plummets. Your profits collapse. And when the courts discover it was stolen, she tilted her head. Your empire becomes a criminal case study. Rowena staggered back a step, her heel catching against the marble. For the first time since Evelyn had ever known her, Rowena Blackwood looked frightened. That's why you let me marry him, Evelyn said quietly. Because I was valuable. Because my mind was useful. Because I saved your company. I got your son his management rights. Rowena swallowed hard. The truth hung between them undeniable. 2 days, Evelyn repeated. Or I take everything. Rowena's chest rose and fell violently. She opened her mouth, closed it, then nodded stiffly. I will handle it. Evelyn straightened. Good. She turned without another word and walked away, her heels echoing across the vast foyer. Behind her, Rowena sank slowly into the nearest chair, her face ashen. Outside, sunlight spilled across the manicured gardens. Birds chirped. The world carried on, blissfully unaware of the war just waged inside those walls. Evelyn descended the steps slowly, her breath shaky, her pulse still racing. Only when she reached the driveway did she stop. Her hands were trembling. Her chest felt hollow. But beneath it, something unfamiliar stirred. Relief, strength, freedom. For months she had endured humiliation, betrayal, manipulation, and suffocating restraint. She had swallowed her pain, carried it quietly, let it erode her from the inside. Not anymore. She exhaled slowly, tipping her face toward the sky. For the first time she felt taller. Not in stature. In spirit. Chapter 19. Nathaniel had barely slept. The walls of his office felt too close. The silence too loud. The weight of everything crashing down on him in relentless waves. Evelyn's cold, unwavering fury. He slammed his fist into the desk, jaw tightening. She had turned his world inside out. And yet, a soft knock interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Come in, he snapped. The door opened and Brielle stepped inside. She looked pale, fragile, dressed simply, her hair loose around her shoulders, eyes rimmed with red as if she'd been crying. It stirred something instinctive in him. What is it? He asked impatiently. She hesitated, fingers curling nervously around a thin file folder. I didn't want to do this, she whispered. His irritation sharpened. Then don't. She swallowed, visibly steeling herself before walking closer and placing the folder on his desk. But you deserve the truth. Nathaniel frowned. About Evelyn. His heart jerked. What about her? Brielle slowly opened the folder, sliding a single document forward. Medical letterhead. Clinical language. Cold, impersonal terminology. His eyes dropped to the bolded words. Primary infertility. Permanent. Irreversible. For a moment he didn't breathe. What is this? He demanded. Brielle's voice trembled. It's her medical report. From 3 years ago. The room tilted. 3 years. That was before their marriage. Before the countless pregnancy tests. Before the quiet tears in the bathroom. Before the nights he'd held her as she cried into his chest, whispering apologies she never owed. You're lying, he snapped. I wish I were, Brielle whispered. I found it while organizing some old files your mother kept. I didn't want to believe it either. His chest tightened. Memory after memory slammed into him. Evelyn sitting on the edge of the bathtub, eyes rimmed red, holding another negative test. Evelyn turning away so he wouldn't see her cry. Evelyn whispering maybe next month. Had it all been an act? His jaw clenched. So all this time, His voice roughened. She knew. Brielle nodded slowly. She did. Something ugly and violent unfurled inside him. Before he could speak again, the door burst open. Rowena strode in. Her eyes were sharp, focused, predatory. Sign these. She slapped a thick stack of papers onto his desk. Divorce documents. Nathaniel's head snapped up. Not now. Now, she snapped back. Before you do something stupid. Mom, he repeated, annoyed by the persistence. Rowena snapped. You stupid child. Do you have any idea how much incriminating evidence your little wife has of your affair? She waved a finger between Nathaniel and Brielle, her face red. If this reaches your grandfather, you won't just lose your position, you'll be disowned. She spat. I need answers, he said weakly. You already have them, Rowena said coldly, her gaze flicking to the medical report. She lied to you, manipulated you, used you, and now she's threatening our family. That doesn't. She planned this. Rowena cut in viciously. The lawsuit, the divorce, the exposure, all of it. This was never love, Nathaniel. It was strategy. His mind spun. Doubt, anger, betrayal twisting together until he couldn't separate one from the other. She never wanted your child, Rowena continued, voice razor sharp. She wanted your company, your status, your power. And when she realized she couldn't give you heirs, she trapped you with pity. The word struck with surgical precision. Brielle stepped closer, voice soft. I'm sorry. I didn't want you to find out like this. His chest burned. Years of love. Years of loyalty. Years of sacrifice. Were they all lies? Rowena shoved a pen into his hand. Sign. Now. Anger surged. Humiliation. Rage. He scrawled his signature across the pages, each stroke heavier than the last. Rowena swept them up instantly. Good, she said crisply. It's being submitted immediately. And just like that, it was done. The courthouse doors swung open with a hollow echo. Evelyn stepped outside into the pale afternoon light, the thick manila envelope clutched in her hands. Divorced. The word felt surreal. Too small for the devastation it carried. Too neat for the chaos it had carved through her life. She stood still for a moment on the marble steps, breathing in slowly, steadying herself. This was supposed to feel like freedom. Instead, her chest felt strangely hollow. Evelyn. Her steps faltered. She knew that voice too well. Slowly she turned. Nathaniel stood a few feet away. His posture rigid, eyes dark and storming. In his hand was a single folded document. Her throat tightened, but her face remained composed. What do you want? She asked quietly. He held up the paper. This. Her gaze flicked to it once before returning to his face, unflinching. Say something, he demanded, stepping closer. Explain this. She exhaled. Explain what exactly? Don't play games with me, he snapped. You know damn well what this is. She studied his face, the tension, the anger, the betrayal vibrating beneath his skin. Then she said evenly, a medical report. From 3 years ago. So you admit it. I acknowledge its existence, she corrected calmly. Not its truth. His brows slammed together. You're saying it's fake? I'm saying I've never seen this report before in my life. Silence fell between them. Cars passed behind them. Voices echoed across the courthouse steps. The world moved on, indifferent to the implosion of their marriage. You expect me to believe that? He demanded. Yes. Her voice didn't waver. That entire time, every appointment, every test, every tear. You think I orchestrated some elaborate performance? Her lips curved in a humorless smile. For what purpose exactly? To trap me. A soft, incredulous laugh left her. Trap you, she repeated. His jaw tightened. You knew how badly I wanted children. Yes, she said quietly. Which is exactly why I would never lie about that. Her eyes shone now, but her voice remained controlled. I cried alone in bathrooms. I lay awake at night counting dates and symptoms and hope. I held negative test after negative test and wondered what was wrong with my body. You think I would choose that misery? He hesitated, just for a second, but anger quickly reclaimed him. Then where did this come from? I don't know, she said honestly. But I do know this. Your mistress is pregnant. Your mother despises me. And suddenly, a 3-year-old report appears the moment you need justification. His expression darkened. She let the silence stretch before continuing softly. I don't need to defend myself anymore, Nathaniel. We're divorced. That chapter is closed. He scoffed. She lifted the envelope slightly. I came here for closure, not interrogation. She turned to leave. His hand caught her wrist. Wait. She froze. Slowly, she looked down at his grip, then back up at his face. He released her immediately. You're really just walking away? He demanded. Yes. After everything? After everything, she agreed. His chest rose sharply. You don't care at all, do you? Something sharp cut through her. She laughed low, brittle. I cared so much it destroyed me. You destroyed me. Now I'm picking the pieces. Then her gaze hardened. But now? You're having a child. That's what you wanted. So go be happy. His eyes flickered. Go build your perfect family, she continued evenly. With Brielle. With your mother's approval. With your heir. Her voice softened just slightly. I hope it gives you everything I couldn't. Then she turned and walked away. Each step felt like glass beneath her feet. She didn't look back. Unbeknownst to her, Brielle followed. She remained across the street, half hidden beneath the awning of a closed boutique, watching as Evelyn disappeared through the revolving doors of a high-end hotel. The warm golden glow of the lobby swallowed her whole, its luxury a cruel contrast to the storm unraveling inside her. Brielle's lips curved slowly. So predictable. Pain always drove Evelyn toward solitude and alcohol, toward places where she could disappear into noise and anonymity, where no one would recognize the former Mrs. Blackwood, where she could sit and unravel quietly. Brielle turned slightly. A man stood beside her. Tall, broad-shouldered, forgettable in the way professionals always were. Go, she said softly. He nodded once and crossed the street, slipping into the hotel lobby moments later. The bar was circular, sleek, dimly lit with amber lights that cast long shadows against polished marble and glass. Soft jazz murmured in the background, blending with low conversation and the occasional clink of crystal. Evelyn sat alone. Her elbows rested on the counter, fingers loosely wrapped around the stem of a martini glass she hadn't yet touched. Her gaze was distant, unfocused, fixed somewhere far beyond the bar shelves stacked with glowing bottles. Her reflection in the mirrored wall barely looked like her. The man entered without drawing attention, scanning the room once before selecting a stool directly opposite her, separated only by the curved stretch of polished counter. He signaled the bartender. They leaned toward each other, voices low, indistinct beneath the hum of the bar. After a moment, the man reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch, no larger than a coin purse. He placed it discreetly on the bar along with a thick wad of cash, sliding both toward the bartender. The bartender's eyes flicked to the pouch, then to the money. His jaw tightened with hesitation. The man smiled slowly, indulgently. Relax, he murmured, voice smooth, coaxing. It's not dangerous. Just a stimulant. His gaze drifted meaningfully toward Evelyn. Silence stretched. Then the bartender exhaled sharply, fingers closing around the cash. He nodded once. The man slid the pouch closer. The man gave some more instructions and left. The bartender slipped the pouch beneath the counter, his expression carefully neutral as he reached for a fresh glass. Chapter 20. Dominic hadn't planned on going to the bar. He'd been coming back after seeing off his guests when he noticed her across the lobby. Evelyn. She moved like someone walking through water. Slow, distant, her shoulders tight, her expression carefully blank. The court-issued document was no longer in her hands, but he could see its weight etched into her posture. The kind of exhaustion that didn't come from lack of sleep, but from emotional attrition. From finally cutting something loose after years of holding on. They finalized the divorce today. The knowledge landed heavily in his chest. He wasn't sure why he followed. Instinct, maybe. Or concern. Or something far more dangerous. The need to be close to her when her world was reshaping itself. He watched her enter the bar. And then he went in after her. The bar was dim, warm light pooling over polished wood and glass. Low jazz hummed through the air, intimate and slow. Evelyn sat alone at the counter, her back straight, her fingers resting lightly against the stem of a martini glass. She looked fragile. Not broken or helpless, but stripped raw. Dominic slid onto the stool beside her. She startled slightly, then turned, eyes widening. You. A small, surprised laugh escaped her. Do you just haunt places I go now? Only the ones where you look like you're about to drink yourself unconscious. She snorted softly. Good. That was the plan. Before she could lift her glass, the bartender placed a fresh drink in front of her. Dominic, distracted by the faint tremor in her hands, picked it up without thinking and took a long swallow. The bartender stiffened. Dominic barely noticed, too busy grimacing. Strong, he muttered, setting the glass down. Hey, Evelyn protested. That was mine. He glanced sideways at her, amused. So that's the plan? Drink the night away. She shrugged. I'm celebrating. Celebrating a divorce. Celebrating freedom. Her lips curved faintly around the word, but there was ache beneath it. The bartender hurriedly replaced the drink. Evelyn took a big sip, then blinked. Oh, she coughed lightly. That's sharp. Dominic laughed, then finished the glass for her. A soft warmth began spreading through his limbs almost immediately. Faster than expected. Heat crawled along his skin. Evelyn exhaled, tugging lightly at the collar of her blouse. Why is it suddenly so hot in here? Dominic shifted, loosening his tie. Was just thinking the same thing. The room felt closer. Smaller. The air thicker. Their knees brushed beneath the bar. A fleeting contact that sent a jolt through both of them. Evelyn inhaled sharply, her gaze lifting to meet his. Something unspoken flickered there. Uncertainty, relief, exhaustion, and a fragile need to be understood. Two waiters approached. We'll escort you to your room now, ma'am. Evelyn frowned. My room. Her thoughts were sluggish, slippery. I didn't. Dominic leaned toward her. I've got a better room. She blinked at him, then laughed. He took her hand. They escaped toward the elevator amid soft, breathless laughter, the waiters calling after them before eventually giving up. His suite was dim, the city glowing through floor-to-ceiling windows. The moment the door closed, Evelyn shrugged out of her blazer. It's really hot, she murmured. Dominic followed suit, tossing his jacket aside, unbuttoning his cuffs. The room felt charged. They stood too close. Close enough to feel each other's breath. Close enough to feel the pull. Neither of them remembered moving first. Only that suddenly her hands were gripping the front of his shirt, his fingers tangled in her hair, and their mouths collided in a kiss that was all hunger and disbelief and release. It was nothing like the careful restraint that had marked every interaction between them before. This was messy, desperate, real. He backed her toward the bed, breaking the kiss only to murmur against her lips, voice thick. Tell me to stop, Evelyn. Her answer was immediate. Don't. The last fragile barrier shattered. They fell together, the world narrowing to heat, breath, and sensation. Betrayal stood in a dark corner of her lavish apartment, phone clenched in her trembling hand. You had one job, she screamed, her voice shrill with fury. Feed her the aphrodisiacs and get her into the room. On the other end, the man stammered, panic thick in his tone. I did everything exactly as you said, ma'am. It was going perfectly. She drank it. She was already getting dizzy. But then a man joined her. His voice faltered. A man. Betrayal hissed. Yes. Tall. Broad. Dangerous looking. He took her drink. Then he stayed. He took her upstairs himself. The words spilled out in a rushed tumble, as if repeating them enough times might somehow soften the blow. Silence descended. Then crash. Something shattered against the wall behind Betrayal, exploding into fragments across the marble floor. You're useless, she spat, her voice trembling with rage and humiliation. Absolutely useless. She ended the call violently. Another crash followed. Glass, porcelain, something expensive, breaking apart under her fury. Her chest heaved, nails digging into her palms. Someone else had touched Evelyn. Someone else had taken what was meant to be her final humiliation. She broke another vase. Chapter 21. Evelyn barely made it to the bathroom. The sour burn crawled up her throat with ruthless speed. leaving her gagging as she dropped to her knees in front of the toilet. The retching came hard and fast, her body folding inward as if trying to empty itself of everything. By the time it stopped, she was trembling, palms braced against the cool porcelain, breath coming in shallow, shaky pulls. Exhaustion washed over her in heavy waves. This was the 5th time this week. She rested her forehead against the rim, eyes squeezed shut, waiting for the nausea to fade. It lingered stubbornly, twisting her stomach into tight, miserable knots. Crackers were the only thing she could keep down lately, dry, bland, tasteless. Even water sometimes turned rebellious. Something was wrong. Food poisoning, maybe. A stomach virus. Stress. By late afternoon, hunger forced her to move. She pulled on a sweater, slid into flats and headed out toward the grocery store, the same one she hadn't stepped into for weeks. The memory rose unbidden. Betrayal. The staged fall. The screaming. The accusing eyes. The circle of strangers closing in, their judgment sharp and merciless. Her steps slowed. She hadn't gone back after that. Not until Bethany had visited. Beth had noticed her hesitation instantly. "What happened?" she demanded, arms crossed. "And don't even think about lying." So Evelyn had told her everything. Bethany's reaction had been volcanic. She had cursed Betrayal with creative, multi-layered fury, thrown in Nathaniel's entire bloodline for good measure, and then with frightening efficiency, orchestrated a small, devastating performance. 2 days later, they'd returned together. Bethany had stopped her loudly in the produce aisle, right near a cluster of notoriously curious housewives. "Evelyn," she'd called out. "Oh my God. I heard what happened here the other day. That woman attacked you, right?" Every head had turned. Evelyn, heart-pounding, had followed the script perfectly. "Yes," she'd said clearly. "That woman is my husband's mistress. He got her pregnant and she decided humiliating me in public would make her feel better." The gasp that followed had been glorious. By the next day, sympathy replaced suspicion. And Betrayal? Never showed her face there again. The memory drew a faint smile from Evelyn as she pushed her cart down the aisle. She grabbed crackers, soup, tea, anything gentle. Then she reached the personal care section and froze. Her gaze snagged on a familiar shelf. Pregnancy tests. Her heart stumbled. No. The thought rose instantly, violently rejected. No way. She stared at the box like it might leap at her. Nausea. Fatigue. Food aversions. Heightened smells. Dizziness. Her pulse quickened. She had missed her period this month. No. Absolutely not. She hadn't been intimate with anyone in over 8 months. Unless her breath hitched. Her mind slammed into that night. Dominic. Heat. Skin. His mouth. His perfect body moving over hers. Her body reacted instantly, a slow, humiliating warmth spreading beneath her ribs. She shoved the memory aside. She had promised herself she would never think about that night again. Ever. It had been a mistake. A beautiful, reckless, catastrophic mistake. Still, her hand drifted toward the shelf. She looked around like she was committing a crime. Then, heart-hammering, she grabbed a test and dropped it into her basket. At home she delayed. For hours. She cleaned the kitchen, organized her wardrobe, answered emails, took a shower, made tea she didn't drink. Anything to postpone the moment. By evening, she stood in the bathroom staring at the small white stick in her hand. Fingers trembling, her chest felt too tight. Her pulse roared in her ears. This was ridiculous. This was paranoia. She set the timer. The seconds stretched endlessly. Her gaze fixed on the tiny window. One line appeared. Then another. Clear. Bold. Undeniable. 2 lines. Her breath stopped. The world seemed to tilt. Her knees buckled, and she caught herself on the counter, staring at the result in disbelief. "No," she whispered. Then the truth crashed over her. Her vision blurred. Tears spilled down her cheeks, silent and unstoppable. She was pregnant. Her hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob as emotion surged violently through her. Shock, fear, wonder, disbelief, joy, all colliding at once. A baby. Her baby. A life growing inside her. She sank down onto the cool tiles, back against the cabinet, clutching the test to her chest as tears streamed freely. After everything she had lost. After the betrayal. After the humiliation. After the loneliness. She was not alone anymore. A shaky laugh escaped her, tangled with sobs. "I'm going to be a mother," she whispered into the empty room. And for the first time in a long while, the future didn't look like a battlefield. It looked like hope. Chapter 22. Evelyn barely slept. She lay awake for most of the night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, one hand splayed protectively over her stomach. Every time she drifted close to unconsciousness, her thoughts dragged her back under. 2 lines. A future she hadn't planned. A man she hadn't allowed herself to think about. Dominic. She shoved the name away and forced herself out of bed before sunrise. If she stayed still too long, she might crumble. And she didn't have the luxury of falling apart. Today mattered. She showered, dressed with meticulous care, and pinned her hair back in a sleek, professional style that made her feel armored. Her best business suit hugged her frame just right, sharp lines, dark fabric, a quiet declaration of competence. The woman in the mirror looked composed, controlled, successful. No one would guess she was carrying a storm inside her. Today she was leaving on an overnight trip to Washington for a presentation of her prototype. Her stomach fluttered. Nerves, anticipation, fear, pride all tangled together. This was it. 6 months of relentless work. Sleepless nights. Countless revisions. A prototype she'd poured herself into. Today, she would finally present it to the people who mattered. Today could change everything. She squared her shoulders and left. The office buzzed with energy when she arrived. Her team greeted her with enthusiastic smiles and thinly veiled envy. Washington trips were rare. In-person presentations even rarer. And the boss? No one had met him. He existed only as whispers, emails, and impossible standards. "Apparently you're traveling with him," Eva whispered, eyes wide. Evelyn blinked. "With who?" "The big boss. The invisible overlord. The man, the myth, the legend." She snorted. "You're ridiculous." But her heart sped up anyway. The assistant appeared a few minutes later, polished, efficient, and intimidating in a way only career professionals could manage. "Miss Breyer? The boss is ready. The vehicle is waiting." Her co-workers erupted in congratulations and last-minute advice. She accepted it all with a distracted smile, slung her bag over her shoulder, and followed the assistant outside. The SUV was black, sleek, expensive. Its tinted windows reflected her face back at her, pale, tense, uncertain. The assistant opened the rear door. She bent to step inside. 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Then she froze. Dominic sat across from her, tablet in hand, tailored suit immaculate, presence as commanding as she remembered, maybe more. His dark hair was neatly styled, his jaw sharp, his posture relaxed in that effortless way that suggested power without strain. Her lungs forgot how to work. He looked up. For a split second, his expression remained neutral. Then recognition hit. Shock flared in his eyes. "What are you doing here?" she breathed. "I should be asking you that," he replied automatically, then paused. Understanding dawned. His gaze sharpened, dropped briefly to her lap, flicked back to her face. "Evelyn Breyer," he murmured. Her brows knitted. "Yes." A short, incredulous laugh escaped him. "You're Evelyn Breyer." She stared. "Are you the big boss?" He leaned back, exhaling. "Apparently." Silence crashed between them. The door closed. The vehicle pulled away. Evelyn sat rigidly, heart hammering. Of all the people in the world, of all the possible faces behind months of anonymity, fate had chosen him. The man she had woken beside 2 months ago. Naked, aching, confused. The man who was, statistically speaking, 99.9% responsible for the life currently growing inside her. Just great. The journey passed in strained civility. Dominic focused on his tablet, jaw tight. Evelyn stared out the window, watching the city blur past, her thoughts spiraling in 100 dangerous directions. Neither of them mentioned that night. Neither of them mentioned anything that mattered. Washington swallowed them whole. The hotel was towering and luxurious. The conference hall buzzed with high-powered energy. Important faces, clipped conversations, ambition thick in the air. Evelyn barely registered any of it. Her presentation, though, went flawlessly. She spoke with confidence, clarity, precision. Her prototype worked seamlessly. Questions were answered without hesitation. Heads nodded. Notes were taken. And when she finished, the applause was genuine. Dominic met her eyes across the room. There was something new there. Something like admiration. "You did well," he told her later, voice low. "Very well." A rush of pride warmed her chest. "Thank you." For a moment it felt almost normal. Dinner followed. A lavish spread in a private hall. Crystal glasses. White tablecloths. The rich scent of steak and wine and indulgence. The smell hit her like a physical blow. Her stomach lurched violently. She clamped a hand over her mouth, standing so abruptly her chair scraped loudly across the floor. "I'm so sorry," she choked, already moving. "Excuse me." She barely made it outside before gagging, dry heaving into the night air. Cold wind kissed her overheated skin. Tears pricked her eyes. She bent forward, breathing shallowly, willing her stomach to calm. Footsteps approached. "Evelyn." Dominic's voice, concerned, sharp. "Are you all right?" She nodded quickly. "Fine. Just nerves. Big day." He didn't look convinced. "I ordered something lighter for you," he said. "You can eat out here if—" The scent of food drifted toward her. Her stomach revolted. She gagged again, violently this time, barely managing not to be sick. The container hit the ground as Dominic dropped it, hands instantly on her arms, steadying her. Hey, easy." His voice softened. "What's wrong?" "I said I'm fine," she snapped, then winced as another wave of nausea rolled through her. He frowned. "You're not fine. You're shaking." "I probably caught a stomach bug," she muttered. His jaw tightened. "We're going to a doctor." "No, yes." "No," she repeated sharply, panic flaring. "I'm not going to a doctor." He stared at her. "Why?" "I said I'm fine," she insisted, pushing weakly at his chest. He didn't budge. "Evelyn." Something in his tone, calm, commanding, unyielding, shattered the last of her control. "I'm pregnant, for God's sake." The words tore out of her, raw and loud and unstoppable. Silence slammed down around them. Dominic froze. His hands slid slowly from her arms to her sides. His eyes widened, not in anger, not in disbelief, but in pure stunned shock. They dropped to her stomach, as if expecting visible proof. "Oh," he said. The single word sounded helpless. She folded her arms protectively over herself, bracing for impact. For accusations. For anger. For blame. "Who's the father?" he asked, too softly. Her throat tightened. She looked away. "I don't know." His breath hitched. "What do you mean you don't know?" Her voice dropped. "I mean, there's only one possibility." Understanding crashed into him. His gaze snapped back to her face. "It's mine," he whispered. Not a question. She winced. "Maybe. Probably. Definitely." She exhaled shakily, waiting for the explosion. It never came. Instead, he laughed. A startled, disbelieving sound. He ran a hand through his hair, eyes bright with something that looked dangerously like wonder. "It's my baby," he breathed. Her head snapped up. "Wait. You're happy." "Of course I am." He stared at her, stunned joy breaking across his face. "I'm going to be a father." She blinked. This was not the reaction she had prepared herself for. Not the tense conversations. Not the endless contingency planning. Not the fear of rejection that had twisted her stomach for days. "You're not upset?" she asked quietly. "Upset?" He shook his head. "I'm shocked. Terrified. Completely unprepared. But upset? No." Emotion clogged her throat. "I thought you'd be angry." "Never about this." Something in his certainty made her chest ache. A soft, tentative smile curved her lips before she could stop it. For the first time since seeing those two lines, the fear loosened its grip. Her baby was wanted, loved, and for now that was enough. In the next story, follow Evelyn's journey as she navigates pregnancy, healing, and the dangerous pull toward the man she was never meant to love. The link is added in the description.
Thank you for listening to this story till the end. If you liked it, please give me a like. I upload these stories regularly, so subscribe to my channel for updates.